We are going to call to order
Recording in
this
progress.
board meeting of October 8th. Today is National Octopus Day, in case anybody wants to know that, October 8th. All right. I have a lot of random facts about those. Sorry. We are going to do our roll call for open session.
Student Board Member Shepherd.
Here.
Student Board Member Devdar.
Here.
Trustee Mahoney.
Here.
Trustee Khan. Here. Trustee Boyd.
Here.
Vice President Hopwood. Here. President Davidson.
Here.
Thanks.
This is new, establishment of quorum. All right, we're getting official here. Okay, we'll now do the AUSD mission and vision statement, meeting norms.
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve the fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Meeting norms. Maintain a focus on what is best for our students. Ensure a safe environment for all views to be expressed, treating each other, staff, and the public respectfully. Endeavor to find common solutions to issues through collaboration without sacrificing one's beliefs in what is best for students. Make a commitment to effective deliberation, each one listening with an open mind while others are allowed to express their own points of view, even if one disagrees.
We will now do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the flag if you would like to join. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. You notice I don't say that. I don't like that one part. I'm a firm believer in separation of church and state as it states in our Constitution. Okay, we took no action in closed session, so we will look for an approval of our agenda or any comments or questions.
I move to approve the agenda as is.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nobody? Great. Agenda passes. We are having a spotlight on Albany Children's Center.
Yes, and I'm excited because Mr. Reed, who is our director, will be presenting on behalf of the Children's Center.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here. I'd like to take the time just to thank all of you for having us. I'd like to thank our staff for coming tonight. We got some teachers, we got our secretary, and just all the things. Anyway, let's roll, and here we go. Welcome to the Spotlight on Albany Children's Center, featuring art instruction and universal design for learning. Okay, quick overview. At our preschool, we serve 3 to 5-year-old children. Our preschool is open 245 days a year. It's open every weekday, pretty much, from 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are 5 preschool rooms. They are named Acorns, Eucalyptus, Sequoias, Oaks, and Willows. We have speech, language, and occupational therapy that are provided on site. At the school age, which is our before and after care, we take care of transitional kindergarten through 5th graders. The school age program serves every elementary school for 182 days of the year, and we're open from 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. All right, I'm going to focus on universal design for learning, one of the district mandates, not the right word, one of our key initiatives. Thank you. Thank you, President Davidson. Anyway, at Albany Children's Center, we incorporate the district's Universal Design for Learning initiative by balancing process art, which fosters creativity and self-expression, with project art, which focuses on structured activities. This approach supports UDL by offering multiple ways for students to engage and express themselves, catering to diverse learning styles. By integrating both forms of art, we ensure an inclusive environment that promotes growth and development for all students. All right, product art has these characteristics. It's adorable, but it has predefined outcomes. It's teacher-directed instruction. It has a focus on the final appearance or the replication of a model, and it emphasizes technique and skills. Some of the positive aspects of product art are skill development. Product art allows children to learn specific artistic techniques. It has goal setting and achievement. Students learn to follow a process to achieve a set goal. There's structure and discipline, and there's pride in accomplishment. A finished product that aligns with expectations can give children a sense of achievement and reinforce the awards of hard work and persistence. Product art can also be a skill that we're trying to teach children. In this photo, children are cutting on a line. They're developing fine motor skills, which is an important component of kindergarten readiness. Developing fine motor skills in early childhood is essential for tasks like writing, hand-eye coordination, and independence in daily activities. Okay, process art. Now, you're going to see more process art because it's a little more desired in preschool, and it allows the children a little more leeway to be creative. The characteristics of process art: it's open-ended. There's no wrong or right outcome. It's a child-directed exploration, and it focuses on the experience rather than the result. And here's the star of the shows, the children. Here's some photos of children making fall crowns, and they get to do whatever they want. Those are leaves, and they're enjoying themselves. A little more of the crowns. We've got one kiddo making it, and we've got someone who's really gotten their hands into their work, let's say. More process art. The two children on the the left here, they're at the easel. Easel painting is very popular in preschool. It helps children with fine motor skills. It helps them practice crossing midline, which is very important in the development of, believe it or not, reading ability, because you have to follow the text from left to right. Anyway, but as you can see here, we've got some cookie cutter shapes on a big piece of paper, and one student's gonna decide to just kind of see what happens when they smear paint. Again, it's about the process. Okay, more process art. They're really thinking outside the box. They've gone from the easel to their hands, and that's what kiddos do. But we've got some great teachers. They're here, and they really let the children explore and figure out what they need to succeed. Okay, I have a quick video on process art where this student tells the teacher about sliding his brush over the paper.
You did what?
It makes a rainbow. It makes a rainbow, teacher.
I see that. You took the stamper and now you're sliding it.
Like a rainbow. First, yellow. Second, green. Third, red. I'm done.
Excellent. Looks gorgeous. Thank
The
you.
red one is falling.
Great job there. Okay, now we've got some bubble wrap art that's proudly displayed in one of the rooms. And you can see that bubble wrap art being created in the middle. You've got more stamping going on the left. And here, the two students are doing marble painting. where you dip a marble in paint and you roll it. It helps with, you guys remember, or your kids. It helps with hand-eye coordination. It's a lot of fun. Okay, positive aspects of process art, creativity and innovation. Children are free to use materials in novel ways. They're able to express their emotions. It's a safe space. There's no right or wrong answer. It allows them to practice problem solving. Students learn to make decisions and experiment with materials and techniques. It helps with confidence. Since there's no right outcome, students build confidence in their ability to express themselves without fear of failure or judgment. And finally, it's inclusive. All students, regardless of skill level, are able to participate fully, fostering a supportive and collaborative environment in school. Thank you so much. Teachers, paraeducators, substitutes. Secretary Danielle Eichner is here. We also have teacher Jamie Shepard and teacher Carrie Shepard here. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank the Central Kitchen. Our chef AO does everything at that place. If you ever get a chance, please come down. Chef will take care of you. The custodial staff, technology services, facilities department, special education, adult transition program. They do our laundry for the sheets for the nap time. Our elementary principals, the office staff at all of those spots. Everyone assists at the sites. It takes a great big team. And finally, well, not finally, but the Albany Education Foundation, they've been very good about helping us with grants. District office staff and the executive cabinet, some of whom are here today. Assistant Superintendent Dr. Ann Shin, thank you so much for everything. Of course, our interim president, our superintendent, Donald Evans, the Board of Trustees, thank you so much. It's my first time presenting this year, and mostly the families and children. You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
It's nothing better than seeing kids making art. We're done. That's all. Meeting adjourned. We're good. Thank you so much for coming and presenting. We really appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on to our student board member reports.
Yeah, so at the high school, the first quarter ends next Friday, October 18th. Tomorrow, October 9th, is senior night for varsity girls volleyball. The ceremony starts at 6 p.m. and they will play Salesian at 6:30. Come and support our class of 2025 seniors and make sure to wear red and white. School site council meets on Thursday, October 17th from 6 to 7 p.m. and no school for students next Monday, October 14th.
At the middle school, there's a school dance for 7th and 8th graders on Friday, October 18th from 7 to 9 p.m. And there's also no school, just like the high school, on Monday, October 14th.
Tomorrow, October 9th, is International Walk and Bike Enroll to School Day for Cornell. The PTA will be holding 2 pumpkin batch bake sales from 11:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Westbury Nursery in Berkeley, one this Saturday, October 12th, and next Saturday, October 19th, and no school next Monday.
At Ocean View, tomorrow is Walk, Bike, and Roll to School Day. And yeah, no school.
And at Marin, they have creative math for the whole family this Thursday, October 10th from 6:15 to 7:15 p.m. And International Potluck is next Friday, October 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. And no school next Monday.
Albany Children's Center has a family picnic this Friday, October 11th at 5 p.m. And this is the first time that they've ever held one since the pandemic, so it's a pretty big deal. The preschool does have school next Monday, October 14th. And before and after school care will be open at all elementary schools on the Monday where there's no school. And that's it for the schools. And for Student Advocacy Committee, we had our second meeting yesterday, and we're currently working on a new student engagement survey. So if you remember the presentation that we gave last year, we're working on a new survey to send out so we can make another presentation for this year. And we're planning to send that out before Thanksgiving break to the middle schoolers and the high schoolers students. And the Junior Student Advocacy Committee, which we created last year, is also moving along extremely well. The student leadership is super proactive, and they're getting a lot of stuff done, like shortening lunch lines at the middle school, and eliminating single-use plastics. And we plan to meet with them soon and hopefully have them come up to our end of the year presentation here as well. So you can see the middle schoolers too. And that concludes our report.
All right, thank you. Lots of information in there. Most importantly, no school on Monday, October 14th, except at ACC. Well, you said 245 days, and I was like, that's a lot of days out of the year. Okay, so you have to be open. Got it. Okay, we are, oh no, I scrolled. Whoops, sorry. We are now taking public comment for matters not on the agenda. So if you have a public comment for a matter not on the agenda, come on up. We're going to encourage you as well to email the board because I'm going to remind you that we can't respond to anything. So make sure to email us so that we can get you a response if needed.
Thanks. I'm Sandy McCabe from the Alameda County Civil Grand Jury Association. And we are past jurors who follow up on past cases, past reports that the civil grand jury has put in. In 21, there was a report that was put out that referenced the titles, which is what you see on a ballot measure. So when you get your ballot, it has what it is this measure is about. And the school board has Measure L, which what we have done is, first of all, let me re-emphasize, we are not pro or con, not conservative, not liberal, has nothing to do with the merits of the measure. It's strictly whether or not the measure is accurate, fair, non-biased, and that's required by law. The Measure L, we reviewed all measures that were on the 34 measures in Alameda County, and everybody has received it. I have sent it to this board already, and presumably each of you has received a copy of this valuation, this rating. Out of a Yelp type score of 5, you got a score of 2.3, which was it was lower than average in this county. It was because the bond did not have any ending date. It does not state an end date. It doesn't say if it's a capital appreciation bond, which means all the interest is at the end. And it also is unclear whether there is an existing bond, so that's why the measure. There is information on the email on how to contact us.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Hi, my name is Susan Moffett, and I am an Albany resident, and I'm here to introduce a project called Path to Belonging. Path to Belonging is a project of the City of Albany, and I was honored to have been selected for the Creative Justice Art Project. That's going to involve, I hope, the whole community, including school district, teachers, families, especially students, staff, and everybody are warmly invited to attend our events. And it's a hard act to follow on the Children's Center art, but it's very relevant because our art projects are very process-oriented. We aim to use art to discuss difficult topics of othering and belonging and to build a sense of belonging for everybody in Albany, especially anybody who has ever been made to feel that they aren't welcome because of who they are. Our first event is this Sunday at the Albany Community Center. We will be making artist books, which are kind of like 3D collages or a cross between a sculpture and a book, and you don't have to be an artist or a writer, but we hope that folks will come and explore themes of home and hometown. And then 2 weeks later, we'll be gathering again at the community center to share those books and tell the stories, kind of as that child was explaining what they were doing when we get together and talk about what we discovered in putting together a collage about what home means means to us will learn something. Our website is pathtobelonging.net. We're on Instagram at pathtobelonging. We're also on Facebook. We will also be sponsoring a poster contest, and we will be having a performance of video projections on the pillars of the BART tracks. And that will be happening next year. And everything that we do between now and then will contribute to the content of that. So I invite everybody, I warmly invite you to participate, especially hope to see a lot of students participate, and hope you all will all be part of Path to Belonging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming to share. All right, we are going to move on to, sorry, this in one place. Approval of our consent calendar. So if we would like to pull any items or have questions on any items or anything.
I'd like to pull item 9H, just for a brief question/discussion.
Okay. Okay, well, do you want to just ask the question? We'll just see where it goes.
Yes, so in our governance handbook, under issue 4, it's the purpose of the consent calendar is only reoccurring and standard contracts should be placed on the consent calendar. Unique and first-time contracts should be listed as action items. And I mean, this is a great agreement. I'm super happy with it, but it's a really interesting, it's to do with infrastructure and billing for this new initiative called the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, and that we can actually bill and for services that we provide, that we're going to have funding for. So that's all great, but I'm just thinking it's a really interesting new initiative and something that, you know, the community might want to have known a bit more about, and so it's a shame that we couldn't have had a bit more on that, given that it is also a new contract. So I just feel like moving forward, we need to make sure that we only have the appropriate issues on the consent calendar. I can see Director Brill's not here, so that's...
So would you rather us pull it and bring it back and then we can have a discussion?
I'm happy to approve it because I think we probably need to do
You're
that, but I
absolutely
just feel
correct.
like we need to be very careful with what we have on the consent calendar, just in terms of it should, according to our governance handbook, it's supposed to be, you know, if it's a first-time contract, it should not
It is a
be-
first-time contract, yeah.
And it's a significant sum of money, and I just think we should be more transparent about that.
We can go either way. Either we can pull it and bring it back as a review and discussion at our next meeting, or we could approve it with the caveat that we would like a review and discussion. Then we won't have to do an action, but at least a review and discussion opportunity or a staff presentation on what this is, what this means, and more information about it.
So I don't think the contract is controversial at all, and it's necessary, and it'll benefit us and it'll benefit our students. So I'm happy to approve the contract now, but I just really wanted to make the point that a more, you know, fulsome conversation would have been ideal.
And you're absolutely correct. It's the first-time contract. Yeah.
Okay. If anyone wants to make a motion, it sounds like there's comfort if we keep it and approve the whole consent calendar, but we can totally request that we bring it back, or we can pull it.
I'd like to bring it back. I mean, I'm fine approving it, but I'd like to have a brief conversation about it.
Do you want to make a motion as such? Or do you have something? Exactly, yeah.
With the caveat, though, right? So I just think we need to approve it with the caveat.
I mean,
Do that.
yeah.
Am I approving?
We're approving the consent calendar as is.
Got it.
And then what we're going
And
to.
when we come back to new items, we'll add it as an item then?
And I have a note of it that says we want a staff report on
Got it,
it.
fine.
And as a new one, we'll do that. But basically, we've said it in the meeting, we have an understanding, we're going to mention it at the end, that's what's going to happen.
Great.
Okay.
Move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Cool, so that we're moving on from that one, and we're on to our review in action. This is a resolution, which is calling this the week of October 13th through the 19th, the week of the school administrator. Maybe they get the 14th off. We at least gave them no kids in most schools, so there you go. Do you want to, we can just read it. So normally what we do for these is we're just going to go down the line of us and we'll ping back when we get to the end. Student trustee Shepherd, would you start us off? Just read us the first whereas.
Whereas leadership matters of California's public education system and the more than 6 million students in services, and
Whereas school administrators are passionate, lifelong learners who believe in the value of quality public education, and
Whereas the title school administrator is a broad term used to define many education leadership posts, superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals, special education, curriculum, and assessment leaders, special school business officials, classified leaders, and all school district directors are considered administrators. And
whereas providing quality leadership and service for student success is paramount for the profession, and
whereas public schools operate with lean management systems across the nation, public schools employ fewer managers and supervisors than most public and private sector industries. And
whereas school leaders depend on a network of support from school communities, fellow administrators, teachers, parents, students, businesses, community members, board trustees, to promote ongoing student achievement and school success. And
whereas the state of California has declared the second full week of October as the week of the school administrator in Ed Code 44015.1, and
whereas the future of California's public education system depends upon the quality of its leadership.
therefore be it resolved that the governing board of trustees of the Albany Unified School District encourages all members of our community to join with it in personally expressing appreciation to our administrators for their leadership, dedication, and devotion to their work.
Do we skip one? Okay.
well, he read it, it just
Oh,
said
sorry.
be it further resolved.
It's all good. Passed and adopted by the governing board of the Board of Education of the Albany Unified School District of the County of Alameda this 8th day of October 2024 by the following vote.
Okay, so this one, we're going to take a motion on a second, and then we will roll call vote this one.
I move to approve.
second.
All right.
Student trustee McKenzie?
Yes.
Student trustee Devdar?
Yes.
Trustee Mahoney?
Yes.
Trustee Khan?
Yes.
Trustee Boyd?
Yes.
Vice President Hopwood?
Yes.
President Davidson?
Yes. Okay. Let that week be the week of the school administrators. Woo, we appreciate you guys. We'll start it off in advance. All right. We are going to move on to our review and discussion, and we have our elementary school SIPSAs being presented.
Yes, and I'm to Dr. Shin, secondary, Michelle Sinclair, who is actually going to start it off, and then our principals will be presenting on their particular schools.
Good evening, Board Trustees, Interim Superintendent Dr. Evans. We're here tonight to present the school plans for student achievement, otherwise known as the SIPSA, for the previous year's SIPSA. And tonight I have with me our 3 elementary principals. We have Cornell's principal, Kat Floresca. We have Marin's principal, Melissa Poole, and we have Ocean View's principal, Ana Delgado. Let me scoot this way. Next slide. Okay, on tonight's agenda, we're going to start off with just talking about the process of the SIPSA, and then I'll discuss the components of a SIPSA, the goals, the actions and the strategies, and then the individual school plans for each of our SIPSAs. Each principal will have an opportunity to kind of share the highlights of theirs. Slide. Okay, so the SIPSA has a purpose, the school plan, and that is to coordinate all of the educational services that go on at each site and to really ultimately improve student achievement. That's the goal of the SIPSA. It aligns with our local accountability plan, our LCAP. The goals all align. And then as far as funding goes, it addresses how school funds are going to reach that goal of increasing student achievement. And then it integrates the purposes of any kind of categorical funds that are earmarked for certain populations. And then the plan is developed and approved by the school site council. The school site council is comprised of the principal, teachers, parents, and other school staff. And they meet regularly throughout the year to look at data and go through this whole process. Slide. So the SIPSA process is a cycle of continuous improvement. Starting at the bottom, we start with analysis. We look at our metrics and we determine what happened. And then we identify a need, or the needs, I should say. And then we set goals based on our district goals. And then we develop actions and strategies. And then we determine how we're going to measure those actions and strategies by using SMART goals and measurable outcomes. Then each year we start the process all over again. Slide, sorry. So data analysis. For this SIPSA that we're looking at, we're going to be comparing 2022 to 23 because it was the previous year. It always kind of goes a step backwards. But our site council this year will meet together to start, and they'll look at the new data from 2024 and compare that to 2023, if that all makes sense. But the data we look at is from the California dashboard and other sources, but the dashboard has all our CASP results on it, and CASP, or the California Assessment for Student Performance and Progress, is that assessment we take at the end of the year, and it's in math, ELA, and science. The dashboard also shows our English learner progress, which is based on the LPAC, and then it also shows chronic absenteeism and suspension. Other data we look at is FastBridge. As you know, 3 times. We screen for FastBridge 3 times a year. We do that for reading and math. And we use our school climate surveys. So we have a California Healthy Kids survey, which used to be administered every other year, and the state put a new requirement that we're going to do it every year, which is really great, I think. And then we also have the California Staff Survey and the California Parent Survey, and we do that every other year. Slide. Okay, once we review the data, analyze the data, we then identify the need. So we want to know, how does the SIPSA tell the story of each individual site? So we ask ourselves these guiding questions. How well are our students achieving? What are the trends? Which student groups do we need to focus on? What evidence-based practices and strategies are we using to support our students? What interventions and supports are we providing to address learning gaps? And then how do we extend learning for those who are meeting or exceeding the goals? Slide. Each site, like I said, each site's goals are related to the LCAP goals, so we use those same goals: academic success, support the whole child, and communication and lead together. But then we apply that to our own site and develop sort of a site goal based on that. Slide. Okay, so for the next part, We're going to start off with showing you what actions, and the next part would be actions and strategies, right? So we're going to start off with showing you which actions and strategies are similar in all 3 sites, because we do a lot of the same things. And then we're going to base those on the goals. So we'll first talk about goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. And then after that, each site will get to tell you some of what they found in their data and some of the unique actions and strategies they're using. So we're going to start off with Kat Floresca.
Thank you. And so for goal 1, in terms of assessing and increasing academic success at all 3 sites, we obviously hire highly qualified, fully credentialed teachers. We teach to the Common Core standards. We differentiate instruction to meet students' needs in the classroom. We administer local assessments in literacy and math. That's the FAST Bridge. And with those assessments, we look at the data in terms of like a cycle. At every trimester, when the assessments are administered, we review and analyze what the scores tell us and see where the student needs are. And then based on that, we have professional development time carved out. Every Wednesday, we have collaboration time, and teachers have release days to ultimately look at the curriculum, look at the data, and then really figure out how can we differentiate in the classroom. Students have access to technology, iPads, Chromebooks. In terms of meeting students' needs, we have systems of support where student study teams, teachers, administrators, adults who support students, and parents, there is an avenue for communication, and that's the student study team. We continue to provide reading intervention and math support for students, and then targeted language development support for English learners. And lastly, we provide summer programming for English learners, students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities.
All right, so for goal 2, supporting the whole child, some of the actions and strategies that we all have in common are administering the California Healthy Kids Survey. As Ms. Sinclair said, it's going to be administered every year from here on out, so that's a good thing. We have social, emotional, and anti-bias curriculum and instruction that's very near and dear to our hearts. That's a very important component of what we do. Some school-wide positive behavior intervention systems that are we get a lot of input from teachers. At some schools, teachers run the PBIS team, and it has an impact on the school culture, a really positive impact on the school culture. As Ms. Floresca said, our student study teams, also known as student success teams, are really vital to really focusing on the needs of an individual student. Our mental health counseling has been enormously helpful to serve students in their specific needs, whether it's in groups or with individual counseling. Our school safety plans are really detailed and have a lot of information about how we will respond in the event of an emergency. Our attendance monitoring, a lot's been going on with attendance monitoring in this last year, with communication. Letters coming out twice a week, I believe, that are just automatically pulled from Aries, or twice. Did I say twice a week? I meant twice a month. But they're on a regular basis to make sure that we're in communication with parents around student attendance, and mental health support team, mental health support not only for students but for staff as well with the Employee Assistance Program, and our California School Staff Survey, which is the same thing as the California Healthy Kids Survey, only for staff.
And for goal 3, in terms of communicating and leading together, some similar strategies that we have at the schools are that we have regular home and school communication. We use Parent Square as well as email. We are using, as much as we can, parent education events to communicate information, provide new information that's particular to either the student population or students as a whole, opportunities for parent and guardian participation in terms of volunteer time at our schools, opportunities for school and district committee participation, really encouraging our families to participate in district committees. Obviously, we hold parent-teacher conferences yearly, sometimes twice a year, well, definitely in the fall and then in the spring as well. We have our ELAC and DLAC meetings to encourage our EL families and students to participate and give us feedback in terms of how we can continue to support them. We've been using translation services that have been very, very successful at our schools in terms of feeling like we're communicating effectively with families in their home language. Definitely providing student progress communication separate from report cards. And we provide that with our interventionists, our resource program, and our ELD teachers. We also similarly talk about the California School Parent Survey that was mentioned before to give feedback and information from parents about how they want to participate and how they do participate in our schools, and our instructional leadership teams where there's a grade level lead. We use those teams to also think about how we're going to sort of have distributed leadership and communicate with families and staff communicating with each other as well.
Okay, so at this point, each site is going to just give you some highlights about each of their SIPSAs.
Thank you. So at Cornell, from the 21-22 school year to the 22-23 school year, we see pretty much an overall consistent performance in English and math on our state assessments. In ELA for students with disabilities, as a group, the scores increased by 7 points, which is absolutely something to celebrate. For our Latino students, as a group, the scores decreased by 8 percentage points. For English learners, the scores decreased significantly. With math, again, we had a slight increase overall. We increased by 1 percentage point. Students with disabilities increased significantly, and that is, again, a consistent just kind of growth and point of celebration on all of the metrics for our students with disabilities, is that they continue to increase their scores and outperform from year to year. Our socioeconomically disadvantaged students as a group also increased their scores in math by 4 percentage points. And for Latino students and English learner students, separate groups in their scores, they decreased significantly. In terms of attendance, we were able to increase our attendance or decrease absenteeism by 1 percentage point. We still need to improve in terms of getting back to pre-pandemic levels, but we're definitely getting there. And in terms of mental health and just overall students' wellness, counseling referrals continue to increase. And that has been a consistent trend both in the 22-23 and 23-24 school year. Next slide, please. And so based on this data, we see that we have some needs in terms of a more focused monitoring and support for our English learners and their progress. We need to continue providing math support for targeted student groups. We need to make sure that we are increasing the social emotional learning and supports for all students. Another need is to really improve and make concrete our multi-tiered systems of support so that all parents, students, teachers know how to access the support they need, and making sure that we're able to follow up on that in a timely manner. And then we also see the need for targeted phonics instruction. And so based on that, during the 22-23 school year, there was a major focus in terms of providing consistent phonics instruction using SIPs and foundations. We continue to provide Tier 1 and Tier 2, so in the classroom and targeted math support outside of the classroom. I'm really excited about our coordination of services team, our cost team, and really solidifying how we are able to respond to students when in need. And what that looks like at Cornell is that in the 22-23 school year, continued last year and into this year, I am really excited about the work that we are doing in terms of making sure that we are students, teachers, families know that we're thinking about their kids, and we're thinking about them in very concrete ways in terms of what we're seeing at school, how we are trying things that are working, that are not working, that are trying to meet the needs ultimately so that we can have more informed conversations when we meet in that SST, so that when we talk about what steps to do, what steps have we tried, we really have a more targeted approach in meeting students where they are. In terms of attendance, continuing to implement targeted outreach with, celebrations and recognizing when kids are able to change how they come to school. And, and just coming out of the pandemic, we see that has been a real struggle for kids. And for little ones, it's big. Those little tokens of appreciation and recognition, even in those, they're meaningful, and they do mean a lot to our little ones. And then continuing with our SART meetings, but making sure that they are really about outreach and making sure that we recognize that families need support and making sure that they know that there is a support network at our school, and making sure that ultimately meeting kids and families where they are to get to school. And then lastly, our student wellness coordinator, that is something that I continue to just really applaud and I'm excited about with Cornell, is that we've had a student wellness coordinator now. This is our third year, and so I just want to thank you for the continued support in that position. We see just an increased amount of students who are being able to be supported by our wellness coordinator, that there's expanded opportunities, not just for individual students, but for whole class. So our wellness coordinator in past years has been able to provide Tier 1 community building circles in the classroom, circles of support in the classroom, and circles of repair when there are issues that come up. And so just being able to expand on that from year to year has been really exciting to see.
So for what's going on at Marin, an analysis of our metrics and where our data kind of fell out is a little similar, a little different from what you just heard about Cornell. So in English language arts, our overall ELA scores went down slightly. Our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, they decreased by 4 points, and our English learners decreased significantly. So that's something that we definitely have in common with Cornell. In math, our overall scores remained pretty constant with the year before. I'm psyched to say that our Black students increased by 22 points. I could say a lot about that I'm going to say later. But our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, their scores increased by 12 points in math, and I'm really excited about that too. So attendance has been a bit of a struggle, for sure. A 3% increase in chronic absenteeism. That's not the direction we want to see that going, for sure. And we're working on that. We'll get to that later. So from the analysis of the data, our needs are to focus our lens on our English language learners and target interventions for them. In math, we want to continue to support a strong math intervention program. And attendance, we definitely need to continue and do more and get better about communicating with families about the importance of attendance. Next slide, please. So what are we doing about it? In English language arts, we spent a lot of time this summer figuring out a heck of a spreadsheet of a schedule that many people weighed in on to prioritize protected intervention time for English language arts and math. When I tell you that was mind-boggling, just reading the schedule is tricky. There's a lot that went into that. We have a designated ELD curriculum, not just at Marin, but at all 3 elementary schools moving forward, and we're pretty psyched about seeing some improvement for our English language learners with the support of that curriculum. All elementary teachers were trained in getting reading right. Last year, it was, gosh, I want to say about every month, we had a district-wide professional development series with LA County Office of Ed. And more consistency with phonics programs in our general ed classrooms. While some classrooms are using SIPs and some grade levels are using foundations, we are all teaching phonics, and that's really, really, really important. So math, I can't say enough about the work that's done at Marin around the math intervention program. We are really fortunate to have the consistency of a staff member who is able to develop relationships with students throughout their time at Marin. And while that might not seem like that's math related, it's hugely math related, because kids don't learn unless they feel safe, unless they feel supported, unless they feel comfortable, and relationships matter. And so having that consistency, I feel like, is one of the many things that have helped support our students, and especially our students of color at Marin, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students as well. So for attendance, we're going to continue to communicate with families about the importance, and that's with the help of the district office having regular reminders go out in our Friday newsletters, and we're going to continue the SART and SARB process. So overall, we are continuing our culturally responsive teaching practices that we've been working so hard on for so many years. We're going to work on impacting the whole child and creating a more positive learning environment for a diverse student population. And then Ocean View.
All right. So at Ocean View, when we looked at our, compared our metrics year over year, we saw that in ELA, our overall scores decreased by 7 points. One of the trends that we saw is that our English language learners' scores decreased significantly, and some of our other, a lot of our other targeted subgroups scores also decreased, but by smaller margins than in previous years, which was a little bit of a glimmer, but definitely still were decreasing. In math, overall, the scores were consistent from year over year, and we saw some increases in some subgroups that we were feeling really good about as well in terms of a trend. Our Black students increased their scores by overall 10 points. Our Latino students' scores increased by 2. Our students of 2 or more races increased by 12 points. Our ELs and students with disabilities, unfortunately, also saw a decrease in their scores in math specifically. Overall, our absenteeism rate fell by 3 points, which we felt really good about, and want to see more of that for sure. In terms of our subgroups, we had some subgroups that had been having very different attendance rates compared to the overall population. And so some of the trends that we saw is that our Black students' overall absenteeism fell by 9 points, and Latino students fell by 7 points, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students fell by 10 points in terms of overall absenteeism, which means an increase in attendance for those subgroups, which we felt very proud about. In terms of our needs at Ocean View, some of the trends and things that we spoke about last year with our site council was very much a significant instructional focus on English language learner students. Our school, as many of you know, is almost about 1/3 of its population is EL, so this is really, really important to us. It's something that we continue to want to support as much as possible with our ELD teachers and with integrated ELD in the classroom. In terms of English language arts, systemic instruction that incorporated phonemic awareness was again a big emphasis, as you heard before, with our GERD trainings and thinking about phonics, and having grade levels be very intentional about committing to not just phonics, but also progress monitoring with phonics. And in math, we've been really working toward, we had a bigger emphasis last year on intervention for math, but we find ourselves also wanting to emphasize not just, the standards in terms of procedural fluency and knowing how to compute, but understanding conceptually what mathematics students are doing and why it makes sense, which is very important for Common Core standards. In terms of our actions, we've been talking quite a bit at in our schools, and last year had a big emphasis on teacher instructional PD to support integrated ELD into our general education classrooms. Having systematic ELD curriculum as well has been very helpful for us, and we think will demonstrate a boost in some of those areas that we know we need support in. As you heard before, instructional PD for the implementation of GER last year was extremely valuable for teachers and feeling like they had something to hold on to and move forward with in terms of their past practices for phonics. And one thing that we felt really strongly about is having data talks to examine the instructional practices and strategies that were needed for specifically our subgroups, and calling out definitely our Black and Latino students in math, and really thinking about what we were doing with them in terms of supporting them with flexible groupings both in intervention and in the classroom. And overall, we did a number of staff development, communications, conversations as a staff, as a leadership team, and as a community around anti-racist teaching pedagogy, because it is very important that at a school, at all schools, and at our school especially, who is very, very diverse, that we have an inclusive school environment where all of our students not just feel seen and welcome and included, but are having adults around them that are looking in the mirror and being reflective about how they communicate, how they react, how they teach, what it is that we are going to do to increase our connection and belonging.
Okay, and that is our presentation. Now we have time for questions.
Okay. Anybody have questions? We can start with an appreciation. Thank you for that very detailed presentation. It was really helpful to kind of see where the actions were coming from on this one and see that, more as a through line. Can you just remind me the years that we were focusing on? Yeah.
It's complicated because it was last year's plan, which means we came to the year with the end of the spring 2023 data. So we were looking at that in comparison to the year before, which was 2022. So think about this year, we'll start with our next site council looking at this 24 data, and we'll compare it to the 23.
Okay, you're right. Okay.
Thank you very much. I was just trying to sort of look at the places where having decreases as compared to the year before, when we're already in sort of post-COVID land where things already sort of took a dive after COVID, is just, I'm sure everyone thinks just kind of alarming. And so I was just wanted to understand, I think at least one of the places that it seemed like was maybe across the schools was for the English language learners, and it was the significant word. So if there's not even just numbers, so if there's just a thought about, I appreciate the actions for what's to come, and of course that's, kind of the most important, but if there's a thought as to what was contributing to those significant, quote, changes.
One thing I'll add is this is a trend that we're seeing across the state, and it's very curious. It's remarkable how much every site at our district. So what is it? We sometimes think well, COVID affected our English learners more because it was difficult to do online learning when you don't understand the language, right? That kind of doubles down on it. There's probably other reasons, and yeah.
We sort of talked about this at our instructional leadership team a little bit, that during the COVID years, we actually saw a decrease in English language learners maybe specific to Ocean View, maybe a little bit, in the sense that there was less transcontinental families coming to the U.S. And so with an increase of English language learners from year to year to year, then, you know, it also creates a situation where there's more students who have more need and have more language needs. So I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if that could be part of it, right? With like less numbers and there's less attention, you know, more attention, excuse me, that can be implemented and focused on. But with more numbers, it becomes, you know, that attention can be sort of diminished. So that was one thing that we wondered at our instructional leadership team. I will say that at Ocean View specifically, you know, for the past couple years, because, you know, 2 years ago we housed like Marin's Kinders, we just had a huge number of ELs too, like in comparison from years, you know, from one year to the next. And also testing, I mean, last year, I wanna say out of all of our ELs, specifically to Ocean View, we had 100 and, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna remember it off the top of my head, over 100 kids that we had to test, and more than half of them were in TK and K. Okay, so that just also gives you a sense of like, are these long-term ELs? Are they beginning ELs? Are they, what grade, you know what I mean? Like they're not older kids that are ELs, they're younger kids. There have been some changes in the EL laws around TK where we are no longer testing them, which provides us the ability to actually do more instruction, because also testing takes a long time. Those are individual tests for every single component. That created a situation at Ocean View where we had to pause some of our instruction for ELD just to get through the LPAC test. So I don't, you know, again, these are like wonderings and possibilities. I don't, you know, I can't pinpoint the exact data point, but those are some things that we talked about at our site.
And I think the way that our like English language learners show up in our data is not just around like test scores, but also like absenteeism. And for me, like just thinking about Cornell and how Cornell is a home base, right? I mean, I think about our teacher, our EL teacher, who is like that connection for families in being able to like just navigate school, translating, navigating how to access like all the different pieces around school. And so I just think of how it is about reestablishing those connections and teaching families how to make those connections at school when it wasn't there for so long. I mean, and it's not so long, it was, you know, a couple of years, but like, I think that also just goes to speak to the connections that families, not just students, but families make to schools and our staff. So.
And I'm going to add one final thing here in addition to what all these wonderful people have said. Curriculum matters. You know, we've got some really great teachers who do some really wonderful things, and the curriculum is the tools that we give them to support our students. And Director Sinclair worked with our ELD teachers last year to kind of focus a lens on a supplemental program that we can have unified throughout the district to kind of hone in on some of these decreasing scores. So we're hoping to see change for next year.
I want to add one more thing. Yeah, we have a designated ELD program now. That's new. The other thing is that I've been wondering the same thing. So I've been breaking down the data, and I'm going to bring the KASP data to you in a future board meeting. But we can now look at 3-year of cohort, which is great because we've done 3 years of SBAC. And so I'll bring you some of that data, and we can look at it together.
That's great, because I was going to follow up. One of my questions was, what does the integrated ELD curriculum look like? Because you said that's new at Ocean View. And so I think it'd be great if we could get a presentation on maybe after we see that KASP data and we look at a 3-year cohort, then we can go back and look at what our new ELD curriculum looks like. And then, I don't know if it makes sense to tie it in, but targeted phonics instruction, you know, are we doing that as pull out, push in? Are we doing that for everybody? Yeah, so I think those are questions where, and I think this is going to be on our minds and a topic of conversation for a little while, is all of that.
And I want to add that that's the great thing now, is we used to do it more just as a pullout, but now every classroom is doing phonics in their classroom.
I just had a quick appreciation because when I was looking at the data, not just like the increases in some of the subgroups, but also sometimes in what you see in other school districts is like the number of students decreases, so the data increases, but here we're seeing the opposite, where the number of students in those subgroups is increasing and the scores are also increasing, so just major kudos to everything y'all are doing. That stood out to me a lot.
Okay, that's a very technical question. Can we define chronic absenteeism? Because I think we say it all the time, but I would love, like, what is that? What are we calling that? And what are we calling just missed days of school?
And just to kind of build, first of all, thank you for bringing this forward. My question was just about absenteeism in general, which seems to be a little bit stubborn for us. I know some schools, it seems like, are starting to bounce back a little bit in the state, and I know we're going to have trouble. What are the big themes I should hold in my head that are really, after we define it, what are the key themes I should hold in my head that are really making that challenging for us? That's what I would ask it.
First, I'm going to talk about chronic absenteeism, because that is if you're absent for 10% or more of the year, it's a measure that the state uses. It's on the California dashboard if you were to look at other schools. There was the trend, our absenteeism or our chronic absenteeism is in line with the state. The good news that we couldn't present because it was for our future SIPSA, but we are improving. I'm just going to give you a little glimpse.
This is old data from when we were still having surges and things and all of those, so we all have to keep that in the back of our mind. Okay. Awesome. We really appreciate it. It was very concise. My first year of getting SIPSAs was like a 3-hour meeting for each site. So thank you for this. This is a really, yes, no, I'm not joking. We had to have like a meeting. I mean, you were there, Melissa, and then another meeting, and then the secondary is way better. So I really appreciate this, and we can actually access the information, so thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Kids are in good hands. Okay. We are going to move on. This is my item to lead to a discussion about our AUSD district committees. So this is one that we paused our committee meetings for right now so that we could just kind of take this little bit of time to look over them. And so my thought around this was, we know that we need to keep our DLAC, which is our English learners, so that seems even more important after that presentation. We're legally required to have that committee, and we're legally required to have a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So those two we're not going to be talking about. We just need to kind of hold in our minds that those are ones that we're going to keep going, okay? The ones for this evening that I thought that we could talk about were the Board Policy Committee, the Environmental Action Plan Committee, sorry, I'm jumping, the Budget Advisory Committee, and the, I had all my notes. I think we were going to talk about the Student Achievement Committee. Yeah. Jumping between too many screens. So the thought here was that we could just pull up kind of what's on the AUSD website, and we can just talk through each committee. So if we wanted to start with the Board Policy Committee, this way we can just review what's out. I know, it's really hard when you see that. This is like we have a chalkboard at our brewery from the week COVID hit, and we shellacked it, and you can never change it. And I feel like we need to do that to some of these, where it's like, this is your honorary seat forever. Okay. So the Board Policy Committee is in place because the Board of Education shall adopt written policies to convey its expectations for actions that will be taken in the district, clarify roles and responsibilities of the board and the superintendent, and communicate board philosophy and positions to the students, staff, parents, guardians, and the community. So the purpose of this is to review and discuss new and revised board policies and make recommendations to the governing board for review and approval. And it's to monitor district-wide implementation of board policies. This was the makeup of the committee in the past, and you can see that we have a lot of vacancies on this committee, and I'll follow it with, in my 2 years on this committee, which were way back years, we did not see attendance from much of our membership. There was like a core of 5 people that would attend the meeting, so it was really hard to make a quorum for those. And I just want to remind everybody that if these are board-appointed committees, they must follow the Brown Act meeting regulations. So that requires them to be in person. That requires them to meet their quorum at every meeting. That requires them to post their agendas in advance, all of those things. So if we shift any of these committees to being advisory, we can open up some things around membership. We can open up around meeting locations, having to post those meeting locations, all of those things. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, I'm pretty sure board members are supposed to be leading our committees, and we've had our district staff leading our committees, which is also, we've been adding work, and that's been challenging. And I remember we had a lot of discussion a while back about, like, are we just supposed to be there to, like, be a conduit of information, or how active should we be? And it was a really confusing role for us as board members to play. I'm going to make a recommendation just on the board policy committee and kind of what I've heard that other districts do, and say that generally this is something that the superintendent, board president, and then generally the vice president kind of work on these and look at the revisions and then bring them and present them for a review and discussion. The other way to do it would be to have, no, I'm not even, this is too challenging, and there's all the Brown Act stuff, so.
Yeah, I would say, having served on this committee for nearly, well, I'd say a year and a half because of the summer break, that I'm not sure that it achieved or really served its purposes, the 2 purposes here. As you said, it was led by staff and not particularly well attended. Was more of a discussion forum, and there's value in that, obviously. But it was really, for example, we talked about the inter-district transfer policy, and it was people kind of giving their perspective and what they would like to see, and so it didn't really serve the purpose of discussing implementation or making recommendations. It was more trying to fix the problem. So I think it's kind of back to front. So I agree with, we've discussed this, what other districts do in terms of board policy.
How do we think about monitoring? How do you think about the monitoring aspect of this committee?
Monitoring?
Yeah, the second goal of the committee.
So that's supposed to be in, like, what we just had, which is that should be part of our progress monitoring on a district-wide implementation of a board policy. So if a board policy was that we're implementing MTSS and UDL, then we would want to see, like, elements of that in our SIPSA presentations. We would want, like, our spotlight had connections to that and elements, and then we could say, okay, we felt like, yes, we're meeting this. And then also I think it's in, like, our consent calendar where we just, today it's like, okay, here's a board policy, are we doing it? And then I think if you're asking on a bigger thing, like, okay.
I'm more asking, like, if we change the structure of this, and it sounds like maybe this wasn't necessarily being done in the committee anyway, not to be judgmental. In this case, we just need to make sure that's preserved somewhere that we can continue to do it from an accountability perspective.
So can I say the way
I'll just say this, I don't think our board has, like, ever sort of more formally visited sites with the eyes for, okay, we're going in maybe with the superintendent or, I don't know, two of us or something, but like we're coming in, we let them know in advance and we say, hey, we're specifically observing for these things that we recently passed or we're going back to. And then we report out on it here in our board member reports. That's sort of the purpose of those. Yeah.
I'm just wondering why we would kind of ever have these committees be board-appointed committees as opposed to advisory committees.
That was started before my time. In your time.
I mean, our time is identical, but yes, so I'm not, it's just a question, because I wasn't aware of various things about the committees, about how they're done in other places. I didn't originally realize that we were we were adhering to Brown Act as far as you can't have more than two, board members in a committee, but the concept of posting agendas and having to meet in person and I just don't know why we would subject ourselves to that sort of regulation if it's not necessary.
I have to laugh because this is my favorite committee. You're tearing down my
I'm talking
favorite
about
committee.
all the committees, by the way, except the two that we already discussed needed to be board appointed. I'm not just picking on this one. I think this one is an important committee. I think they all are, actually, but I just don't know why we would do the extra level of sort of red tape.
And DLAC is an advisory committee. It's just mandatory that we have that committee, and it's mandatory with a bond that we have a bond oversight committee, and they have very certain roles, but those are also not. So some of our committees, like our budget advisory committee, that's an advisory one, okay? But then our board policy is appointed, and we have very specific positions. So I guess my ask on this would be, would we be comfortable as a board eliminating the board policy committee and changing its structure and writing in a board policy, maybe, on, how we would do number 1 and number 2 under the purposes?
Can I say one thing? So the reason why this committee is so important, because there's a lot of issues that come up. Let's say, I'm just making this up, cell phone policy, issues, controversial issues. So those you really do want the board to participate, to be a part of that, as well as bring that back to the board in terms of the homework that they've done, what's out there. So this is one of those ones that I really do think the board should lead and should be more of a board-directed
Would it make sense
committee.
if it was like, okay, let's just say this. Okay, it was Becky and I are doing this, and we talk with you, and we're like, okay, these are the 3 policies that we're working on. And then we hold, maybe not committee meetings in this say, but more like a town hall forum, so that we get that, because I'm nervous that when we say it's a committee, it's the same few voices that we get on those all the time.
So what happens in the board policy committee is that we do all the research, all the homework, and we come up with a draft, and then we bring it to the board when we finalize that, and we do a first reading. And if there's changes, then we go back to the policy committee, make those changes, and we bring it back for a second reading. And some things take a long time, but typically you have a calendar of all the policies that you want to discuss for the whole year. So you're not just working on one, you're working on several. And then you're inviting the public to come in based on the policy that you're working on, or teachers, or whoever has interest in that particular policy. So it's like a whole year of meetings where
Right.
we're working on lots of policies. And all that information, you're like doing all the homework, bringing it all together, putting it together for the rest of the board to.
So Trustee Khan would like to say something, and then I would like to say something, and then we can go back to whoever else.
Go.
For me, I was just going to say, we also have to consider the fact that this time every year, the governor signs a whole bunch of bills that also include policies that schools have to incorporate and figure out how to, make sure that we're in compliance. And so that is another area where, I see a shortfall if we don't have a committee of some sort. Even I'm flexible in that, this could be a seasonal ad hoc that starts every, for X amount of the school year, but also just overall, this one I think we're gonna have to keep whether we like it or not.
So I don't know if I'm being misunderstood. I am not suggesting that we not have any of these committees. What I'm saying is literally none of my committees have been meeting in person except the Wellness Committee. So I don't know whether we approved some sort of a something or other that worked around the Brown Act so we didn't have to be following those things, or if we've just not been in compliance or what. But what I'm saying is have the committees. I do think they're important. I also think it's wonderful for them to be board-led. I'm not going to be on the board, but I do think that it's a great thing to do. But I just, the board-appointed concept that requires quorum, that requires being in person, posting agendas, you can't meet any other way, I'm just not sure why we would subject ourselves to that level of administrative difficulty, and we just haven't been doing it in certain of our committees at least. So that's all I'm saying. But I think that certainly the policy committee is important. I actually think there's value in all of the committees that were listed. I would love for them to continue. I'd love for them to still meet monthly. I think it'd be great for them to be led by board members. I just don't know why they would be board-appointed committees as opposed to advisory committees where there's a bit more freedom as to how you meet.
So I didn't misunderstand you. I think the key thing that I've internalized is like, why do we want them to be board appointed? And I think probably in cases where transparency, I mean, on the positive side from a Brown Act perspective, the transparency aspects of it, where we will want to have a set agenda coming forward where people can come in and comment, are going to be places where we would want a board-appointed committee. I don't think that applies to all of these, so I agree with Trustee Boyd. I think we probably should default to making them advisory committees, except in places where public transparency are critical.
So I'm actually going to disagree. I'm going to disagree on that, and I'm going to say if we make them advisory, we can set the parameters and expectations. Making them Brown Act, we can, fine, if people really feel strongly about that. I feel like we can build in transparency as needed, but I just want to remind everybody, I really want to go one by one through these and not lump everything together, because what I want to look critically at is there any way that we can make the work that we're doing more effective? I'm not saying more efficient, I'm not saying quicker, I'm not saying any of that, more effective, because I struggled on the board policy committee that we reviewed the interdistrict transfer policy for 3 years, and the board has still not seen it in full form or finished it. So I feel like we have to figure out how to have community involvement around our board policies, and understand that the board policies' purpose is to make sure we're in compliance, and make sure that we are developing policies and implementing policies and monitoring policies that are really important to our district and integral. So I would just love to see, do people feel like on this specific one that we're starting with, do we of course, we have 2 board members, great. I don't mind also if it's the same as we all sign up like before. The superintendent needs to attend that one. Who else do we see as critical to attend those on a regular and consistent basis? And how would we involve the community at certain junctures, or do we see it as that needs to be a consistent group of people throughout the year at every single meeting that happens?
I'm not sure that we need to flesh out the details right now. I think we just need to make a decision about whether we keep it as a board-appointed committee or an advisory committee, each one that we're going to review this evening. But I would say, having been on that committee for 2 years, which has technically a membership of 13, with 4 vacancies, that we didn't reach quorum if we were going to be going above board as far as being a board-appointed committee, so we would have been completely ineffective. I like Dr. Evans' suggestion that board members lead it, you have a kind of an agenda, number of policies to work on throughout the year, so it's not aimless, but we have an end goal. And then how we actually engage the community, which I think is really important. Perhaps that's something that we want to discuss at a later time. I feel like maybe this meeting is more about how do we want to kind of reconfigure, but with the sort of details to come, because...
Yeah, we can bring these back
Yeah.
more times, absolutely, but...
Not to be that person, but the technicality with whether we want it to be board appointed versus ad hoc is that the goal. if the goal is something we can achieve in a shorter period of time, we're allowed to make it an ad hoc. But if the goal is something long-term, like we're kind of discussing for policy, we have no choice but to have it as a board appointed, and that's just coming down to Brown Act. Brown Act places those rules on what can be considered ad hoc versus board appointed based on the length or duration of achieving the goal that we're speaking to. So we would have to be very, yeah, ad hoc is advisory, right? Yeah, technically, or no? So ad hoc is the temporary goals where you don't have to follow Brown Act technically, and you don't, like, it's a little bit more fluid in what you can and can't do. The board appointed is the one where we have to have all the technicalities the same way we follow them for our board here.
Right.
So,
CSB is saying Brown Act does not apply to, they say, ad hoc or temporary advisory committees composed of less than a majority of the board. In establishing an ad hoc or temporary advisory committee, the board should strictly define the purpose of the committee and set a time frame to accomplish that purpose. So that's kind of what I was saying is, like, we have committees, and if they're just like, they need to go forever, then we need to think about that. But if we have certain ones that are like for a purpose, and that's why I'm wondering, on our board policy, do we do that, like, okay, these are our policy meetings? Yeah.
So I am very much not a Brown Act expert at all. I think that it would be worth figuring out how to say, if there is any ability to be creative in the way that we think about how we are structuring these committees, because I just, for board policy purpose, for instance, to me, I think what's really valuable is to have two board members who are willing to work on these policies in a very efficient, productive, okay, we're not going to play around with every single word in this policy. The point is, at the end of this meeting, we're going to have something that we're okay with. And if there's something that's really problematic for you, then you need to research it ahead of time, have proposed language ready, et cetera, so that we actually we are effective, from one policy to another. This is not like, anyone's memoir. It's a board policy. So just, let's get something that works and keep it moving. So to me, if community members want to participate in that process, that's great. But I don't think that community members have to be at a board policy meeting so long as there's board members who are figuring out what they think the policy should be, and then it comes to the board, it's agendized, community members can come and speak to it at that point. So I don't know the Brown Act nearly well enough to just be able to opine on what we can do, but I think it's really worth figuring out what we can do, because we should be productive, and we should be in compliance. We shouldn't get to the point that we got to before, where we just had tons and tons of policies that were not in compliance. That doesn't serve our district. So I would like for us to do things that serve our district while still being in compliance, but not just to do things that are silly and ineffective for the purposes of complying with the Brown Act.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was going to ask maybe the flip side question, which is the challenge that these committees are just too big, and because of that, you've essentially paralyzed them from a quorum perspective under the Brown Act. And quite frankly, if we had a smaller group of people that were core focused on this, and it was a board appointed committee, still had to follow some of those rules accordingly, but it was a smaller group, still allows the public to come in and chime in on appropriate things because things are posted ahead of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But allows a much more nimble group of people to kind of, get stuff done, so to speak.
I think what we're talking about here is, so going back to what Donald said and kind of what Melissa just said is, so it would be two board members working together with the superintendent to put together sort of the base piece, and then it gets presented here like this. The public is notified, we bring everybody in and we say, okay, now we're doing it. Okay, we take all that feedback, we work it in that way, and then we put it back. And that's what I was kind of saying with a town hall meeting. Like, if we feel like this is a policy, like the cell phone policy, that we're gonna see a lot more conversation around, we really make sure that we give it the time and the space, but then we hear from more voices. Okay. If anyone has any more on the board policy, we're not making any decisions. I feel like that one we kind of talked about. Do you want to add more?
Oh, for me, just looking over it, I can see environment, budget, special ed, wellness, and student achievement being ad hocs, because for the purposes of like ensuring that we're actually getting stuff done like we want to, because that will put us in a position of having to renew the goal of each of those committees by a certain deadline. I'm flexible on whether it's a 1 year or 2 year goal, but I do think it would allow us a lot more flexibility of reestablishing a goal each year and ensuring that we're making space for more individuals to attend. However, it will also include that we will need to recruit people by a certain time period, because when you make ad hoc committees, you have to know all of the individuals that will be the members leading that committee.
Leading.
Like part of the committee, not just leading, but like you have to list all the, like if I'm making an advisory and I'm saying Michelle Sinclair and Kim Gray and myself and Vani and Dr. Evans are going to be on it, like I have to list all 5 of us. We can't just say the 3 of us and whoever else wants to join us.
But can other people join at meetings?
I think that rule applies for any, right? Ad hoc has very specific rules. I don't remember. I know for the permanent committees, anyone can join and listen. However, it's led by the specific people that have been appointed to it. Ad hoc's a little special, and I forget the rules on that one.
So before we make any choices or decisions on these, we're going to learn more about that, because it sounds like, these temporary advisory. Okay. So our thoughts right now is to kind of move to maybe put together some bullet point rewrite around the board policy, leaning in this direction of kind of get the work done behind the scenes, present it, really make space in the public. Okay, the next one that I wanted to talk about was the Budget Advisory Committee. Now, this one was designed to have because it says there at the January 8th, 2019 board meeting, the board voted to expand their measurement, and it would be a standing committee with a 2-year term of office. Yeah. Can we scroll down, Julie, a little, or whoever's doing it? Okay, and we can see we had all these, a good amount of people attended this well, the few that we had.
So that one, technically, based on how we've defined it, that's actually an ad hoc, but we just called it a board appointed.
Okay.
So, and I think in the way that we have functioned, this would do well as an ad hoc, because again, it lets us relook at things from a different perspective, especially considering all the parcel taxes, the bonds, et cetera, like those impacts and how they'll trickle in will differ year by year.
Now, what I'm going to say on this is, this committee was mostly a conversation about slashing things out of the budget and what to slash, and then it was paused by our CBO, Jackie Kim, because the conversation was a dead end. So that's when we changed our meeting structure, which I personally really liked, was to have a budget corner in every public meeting. So those conversations were facilitated in a board meeting. The presentations were there, documented, they were out everywhere. I would vote, but I think I would prefer to see us shift away from having this committee and into doing that. But, as we get a new CBO permanently, thank you to our interim, that we would go back to having those budget presentations. I found them personally easier than our budget workshops or anything else. But if people have other ideas, that's just my.
I agree with that.
Okay, so budget committee, we're comfortable with turning it into really keeping it part of our board meetings would be kind of the move. Okay. That's good because it had an intentional goal. I'm not also just trying to cut committees, but what we saw before was we had to add a safety task force in 1 year, and then we had to get membership for that. And so I just want to make sure that as we need to shift and change to look at different things in our district, that we're leaving room and space in our own abilities, et cetera. Okay. The Environmental Action Committee is our next one, and Scott Jaffe sent me a whole big, this one. Pretty awesome. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should tell our community, because I saw that someone raised their hand earlier. We're just going to zip through all these, and then we are going to take public comment, and we will reflect on that as well. So we're not, just wasn't going to take it per committee. Okay, so the Environmental Action Plan Committee, this one had a really specific purpose, and the purpose was to deliver an environmental action plan. And so this plan was adopted in 2023, in April of 2023, and basically, once it was adopted, we sort of had like a couple of us show up, and we were just getting updates and monitoring on it. And so what Scott says, that he has been doing, I have to commend him, an excellent job at following Brown Act, except we've been meeting virtually. But he has been doing everything else to the letter, so I think that's been really great. 2 of our community members have recently resigned, just as their life has shifted and changed. And Director Jaffe says, and I'll add this all in, that if the EAP committee were dissolved, the Director of Maintenance and Operation could turn to former members as subject matter experts for consultation when needed. This is not currently possible because the Brown Act prohibits some of these conversations. So, yeah.
Pardon my naivete, but this one seems like it's done. It served its purpose. It shouldn't exist. It was an advisory committee or ad hoc committee, or whatever the right term is, based on whatever it is, and congratulations, they got their poster child for getting their deliverable, and
Yeah.
that's what it should be.
Okay.
Move on.
And then we can have our updates from Scott and other things about what we're doing, and we
Whatever
can,
we had to
as
do
a
for
board, to monitor the progress on this, we should be checking that plan and saying, hey, where are we in this, and having updates as staff reports, et cetera. Okay, great. We are on the student achievement. We can talk about all of them tonight if we want to. I was just going to do 4, so it wasn't such a long discussion. And then I wanted to bring back wellness and special education at another time when we had like more time to really talk about those committees, more with the focus of like, I think that, I just feel like those are ones that are going to be needing more long discussion about how and what, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
For the Student Achievement Committee, I was going to say, wonderful initiative, but I do think that that's why we have the school, I'm forgetting the word, but they have committees, school site council.
Yeah.
And so this is essentially a school site council, but we're trying to replicate it at a larger level. Maybe you can I see disagreement, but to me, I feel like we need more people on the school site councils. We don't have enough folks, and we struggle to get enough folks, at least at some of the sites. I don't know if that's true for all of them, but I would much rather see a focus in those specific spaces versus this committee. Yeah, that was.
So the one thing about this committee, which was expertly run by Dr. Shin, is that it was really big, and we had great attendance. But actually, according to on the district page, 25 members, including 10 vacancies. Obviously, people turning over. If it was going to be a board appointed, it would be hard to reach quorum. And a lot of what we talked about was things like local assessments, like FastBridge, secondary math, intervention. I feel like we're getting more of that now just at board meetings, and I think that's how it should be. I think we need to have district sort of informing the community about what we're doing, and here we identify these problems, and as was done during these meetings. Yeah, so kind of like you were saying about site councils, but I wouldn't even think really for site councils, more just that we have these presentations, like, Director Sinclair talks about assessments, and we've had Principal McNally talking about secondary math. So I'm not sure how much we need it to be on a committee, and Trustee Boyd was also on that committee.
I actually do like the idea of this committee still being a committee in some form, not necessarily board appointed, because I've already said how I feel about those. I think that, to me, there is value in talking about student achievement across the district, not broken down by individual schools, though I do also very much think that school site councils should be well attended and should be well publicized, and there have been times where I haven't known when meetings are happening or if they're happening or whatever, so I think there's kind of a lot that could happen there to make school site councils sort of better attended and more sort of useful. But I do think there's value in having members of the community who have specific concerns, sort of get together, ask questions, figure out who the right people are in the district to respond to those questions when we are able to have different members of, come speak to the committee about, interventions that are available in specific subject matters or whatever, rather than waiting for, okay, there's going to be a presentation in March, just hold on, like it's coming, at the board meeting. Like, I do like the idea of being able to have sort of regular opportunities to sort of ask questions, express concerns, talk about what's happening beyond just the regularly scheduled board. We're talking about assessments on this day, we'll talk about the achievement gap on this day, sort of thing.
Also really like the initiative, the listening campaign. I thought even having that at the core of a new sort of advisory type committee, because that was just a really good opportunity to reach out to community members and find out what their perception of achievement was.
I wonder how we could do that. Just as I'm just rereading the purpose of the Student Achievement Committee, do you think we can put it up on the screen? Just as we're thinking about the whole thing. So it's, I guess I'm a little bit confused because it's to serve as the advisory body for the district's local control and accountability plan development process. So this committee is supposed to develop the LCAP for us. Is that what was being?
Sorry, more to inform rather than to develop.
But you were informing that we were being, like, it was to have the district be informed from the community, or for the district to inform the community? Sorry, glad you're here.
So community engagement is an integral part of the LCAP development, and this advisory, I'd like to call it an advisory committee, played a critical role in that, because they actually analyze student data, whether we looked at the quantitative data, which are the metrics such as CASP scores or the FastBridge scores, all the way to wanting to see qualitative data. That's where the listening campaign came about, because the committee themselves were saying, okay, we're looking at all of this quantitative data and we see the patterns, but we want to really understand the stories behind these numbers. And we want to really hear directly from the students and the families that these numbers represent, right? So they want us to do a deep dive into really better understanding what was behind that in order to come up with the strategies and identify the needs, right? You heard the SIPSA presentation. So the SIPSAs are very much aligned to the LCAP. And within the SIPSAs, they showed the data, and then they also talked about the identified needs as well as the actions. And that's exactly what this committee does. It really looks at the data and really talks about, so what are the real needs and who are the students that we need to focus on? And what are the actions and services that we believe will really support improved outcomes for them? And in that process, we discovered that a large part of our community really does not know what resources and programs and initiatives already exist on sites already. So what we started to do this past year was actually bring in those support providers and service providers and to say, oh, yes, because we would come up with these ideas within the committees and say, oh, yeah, what about this? And then I would say, well, actually, that already exists, and it's happening at the high school. And so next month, I'll bring in that individual who is in charge of that program, and let's listen to them, let's hear from them. And as well as because large members of our body was students of the high school, they were able to give us direct feedback about their own experiences within that program or their experiences in that course that we would actually be discussing. And so again, yes, this is a very good process, again, in the development of the LCAP, where we're looking at the data together, we're talking about the identified needs, the target populations, actions and services, and then actually reviewing over how we're going to allocate resources.
So it's like the output. Should I think about the output as input into the LCAP, right? And so on that basis, doesn't it have a fixed? I'm trying to come up with a consistent pattern in how we think about these things. It has a fixed endpoint in the sense of like we develop the LCAP on a regular basis, right? And thus at that point we move on. It's essentially a new committee to form the next version. Is that the way to? Maybe I should think about it. I don't think this feels like an advisory / ad hoc committee, whatever terminology we're going to use, as opposed to a board appointed one, but.
I guess
trying to
I'm
reconcile
just,
my mind.
yeah, I feel, as I wasn't on this committee, I feel like what you're saying of, oh, let me bring the people into those meetings, I'm like, I think we should be doing that, but like, hey, we're having, on this day at the, morning assembly, like this person is gonna come, so that we reach a broader audience, because I feel like it's great we reached people on this committee, but then where did it go out from there? And we did, we got a couple updates. And I totally understand when, like the input on the LCAP, but you're saying it's tied to the SIPSA, and the SIPSA is the school site council. So I'm just trying to look at like how as this continues, like.
So a lot of the members of our committee were also leaders at their school sites. Served on other committees like the SSC or the affinity groups. A lot of them were affinity group leaders. So we saw them, and they saw themselves as ambassadors, and they had a lot of connections with the parents of the community, and especially our students also are leaders of clubs, various committees that they sat on. So then their responsibility was to go back to those committees, those affinity groups, and actually share the word, because we know that word of mouth is a great way to communicate with people that we have relationships with. And we always did feel as though we knew that the district put out robust communication, weekly communication through the superintendent's office, all of these attempts through Parent Square and these emails that constantly went out, but yet even the committee members themselves were leaders, were not in the know of a lot of things that were happening. So we always really philosophized or whatever, thought about how can we get the word out? And so I think we really came to the understanding that it really happens through relationships. And again, because a lot of these parents as well as students are leaders of their own communities, they were the ones who can then go back and share their learning.
I have to say, sorry, just one last thing. I'm sort of sitting here thinking, oh, we just don't want to make these, like we had amazing presentations from, for example, Mr. Kaysen and from Ms. Fishberg about the math program at the high school. And I'm thinking everyone should hear it, but actually we know that not many people attend these meetings, that they're not watching these meetings. And so I think you're right, is that probably the better way to get that information out, even though it feels like it's just this committee, as you've said, these people are messengers to their communities. So probably it does actually reach more people that way. So I'm backtracking what I said at the beginning, because it feels like everyone should be able to have the opportunity to see this. But of course, we know that people don't really engage with these meetings in the same way as they do with that committee.
But is this really a committee then? Is it advising the board on is it a board advisory committee? Or is there something else that we want to, because I think it's really important to have these opportunities for these conversations and to have these opportunities to share this information in a more intimate setting. I think it's really important. What else can we look at?
And I think that's the key question, advising the board. Or is this more the schools? How do you see that? Because that's what I was thinking. In order to be a board committee, how are we advising the board?
I think
Board
it's,
advising the public, or, you know?
yes. So we also had problems with the board bylaws, right? We wanted to, meeting on Zoom was most efficient for us, especially for our students. So we definitely didn't meet Brown Act, and meeting the required composition that was outlined here, we definitely didn't do that. Although we had robust membership of 25 members, they didn't meet that criteria of fitting in that composition. So I don't believe that it's best to be a board board committee. And I know we've made annual recommendations, but that's all it really is, recommendations, and we understand that. We're not necessarily advising the board, but because we did such passionate work around wanting to learn about our community's needs and our student data, of course, the committee members wanted to put forth some recommendations just based on what we learned. So I would say
It's typically what you see when you're getting input for the LCAP, you go out and you meet the entire ASB, or you meet with all the different affinity groups, all the members of each one of those groups. It's much broader than that. It's a lot more meetings, but I do understand this has representatives from all the different groups. But typically, you know, you're going out and meeting all of them. But it's more for LCAP and than anything else.
So I think, yeah, do you want to go and then I'm going to, Melissa, yeah.
Okay, so using myself as an example, I'm not going to be on the board anymore. I am very concerned with student achievement, our achievement gaps, why it is that certain groups of students are always in certain percentages of not meeting, you know, where other students are. I get that it happens all over the place, but I can't be a part of what happens all over the place. I also get that it's happening here in this quite small district where I would like for things to be different. I would like to be involved when I am no longer on the board. I would like to have an opportunity to be involved in not just once a year I come and listen to, you know, a presentation on assessment and we talk about sort of what we're doing and what our initiatives are, and, you know, in a year we'll check back in and see if any of this stuff worked. I would like to be as actively involved as I can be, specifically on the issue of student achievement. And so if there is no committee for this, I don't know how a community member does that. And I'd like for there to still be an opportunity for community members to be actively involved in student achievement for those who are really interested in coming every month, in reviewing data, in, you know, talking about why aren't these resources working? Who are the communities we're not reaching? Why do these numbers not change? Can we have parent ambassadors, like people who really want to work on this specific issue?
I think what we should do is bring back conversation at our next review and discussion about this committee, but I also really want to look critically at what a school site council's role is and what it's supposed to do. And then maybe we need like a school site council umbrella where like representatives from each school site council get together and it's more similar to this, and make sure that that's kind of how we build it, and take that instead. I don't know, that's just an idea I'm throwing out. But I'm thinking, let's bring this one back just so that we don't hear our budget presentation at 10 o'clock. I know, but I don't want to go another hour on this, so I was saying, yeah, let me move us along. That's why I didn't want to do all tonight. But I'll make sure that when we do the next one, we bring back those three. Just be thinking as we go into the next ones, hey, like what would I see this as in its next iteration, or is it just working perfectly as it is? That's fine. I think these are really valid points, so.
I looked up the ad hoc rules. Anyone can participate, but for both standing and ad hoc committees, public can only comment during public comment sections, but otherwise anyone can attend both.
Yeah, my thing was, when we bring this back, we also bring back some structure or some more knowledge around what the rules need to be, because I think we're all doing it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why we're having these discussions as we go. It's like, what do we know, what do we not know? And how do we lead into making our decisions so that we know what we're going into the new year? We have one public comment on this that I want to make sure we let go, and then we will move on.
Hi, good evening. Ian McLeod, I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Committee, and I was a member of the Environmental Action Plan Committee. And I really would like to stress the importance of that committee. And I know we did adopt the plan. We went through an enormously long process and a very involved process, and had a lot of dedicated volunteers and a lot of great help from Scott Jaffe and Kim Trutain. But it, you know, it's not necessarily meant to be a one and done sort of thing. It's an ongoing process. We had a lot of students involved, we had faculty involved, we had staff involved. Part of the goal was to foster communication between the district and the city. We had other city committee members on there, and it really informed the process to align school district's goals, environmental sustainability goals, with the city's goals, with its climate action plan, and get everybody kind of moving together, fostering dialogue, sharing expertise. You know, I've really appreciated being on the committee. It's been a privilege to be there and help out. And I'm really interested in continuing. And I know we have a lot of really dedicated people on our committee. So I wouldn't necessarily just dismiss it out of hand saying, oh, we did a document, we're done. That's not really the point at all. It's a living document. Implementation is now the really big important thing. And, you know, we've made some progress in some areas, but there's an enormous amount of progress to do still. And I think part of it, of having this committee, is accountability, and also, you know, getting students involved, getting students to go back to their groups. You know, who really thinks this is important are your students. They're passionate about this stuff. And I don't think I would just dismiss this committee out of hand. It should continue in some form or another. So, and I would really like to continue. Bring my expertise and professional opinions and knowledge to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone, something I said earlier is maybe that we say, okay, that iteration is done, and then we're building into something new. So I don't want people to think we're just going to like dump on things, but anything that we say, okay, we're changing that, we want to make sure that we incorporate in different ways. Okay. We are going to adjourn this item. Look, we stay perfectly on schedule, and we are going to have our staff report on our updated budget assumptions and enrollment data for the school year 2024-2025.
So I do want to apologize for this presentation not being online. I know the board got it today. We were still finalizing this even up to today. And so typically, we bring the budget revisions as a part of our first interim. But given the potential budget reductions that we had talked about earlier or towards the end of last year, and then we also have enrollment increases in many of our grade levels. And so that has grown. So we thought it was prudent to bring this back, more of an updated enrollment in some of our major budget assumptions. We thought this would be a good time to bring this to the board. And so this will help us as we inform all of you of what we need to modify or maybe change moving forward in terms of the budget. So essentially, how does our bottom line look with this updated information that we're about to present to you tonight? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our interim CBO, Chris Thomas.
Good evening. Thank you so much for letting me come and talk to you tonight. And thank you, Dr. Evans, for giving that intro. We have been diligently working on this budget, kind of going through it line by line, evaluating it. Now that we've closed the books, we're really looking back at last year and having that information and closing help inform us for this year. So things like looking at our utility costs. How did our utilities come in? PG&E, as you know, can fluctuate pretty widely. You can imagine at a school level how big that can be. Garbage, for example, can be a large ticket item. So we're really taking that last year's information and then applying it to this year. And in some cases, we're looking back at trends of 2 or 3 years to try to understand where do the trends say that we should go as far as modifying this year's budget. So tonight, we're going to look at an enrollment update because talking about trends, that's super important for us. It drives the majority of our revenue under the LCFF. We're going to look at average daily attendance. I know you guys talked earlier about truancy rates. We're going to talk about attendance rates, which is really just the opposite, and kind of what we're seeing with that. Unrestricted revenues, we're going to touch on unrestricted expenditures. Of course, the unrestricted being where we have the greatest flexibility to make decisions. Estimated overall impact on our general fund. So when we look at those major assumptions, what do we think that impact's going to be? And then we're going to touch on some restricted programs, and we're going to look at next steps. I'm going to try to move quickly because I know it's getting late. So enrollment update, good news, our enrollment is up. It's up much higher than we anticipated it was going to be. So last year we had 3,574. That was October of 23. We projected 3,550 for this budget year, and we're coming in not at 3,694, which is what this slide shows. We're actually coming in currently at 3,701. So we're up even further, even in the last few days, or the last couple weeks since I've looked at this. So I'm going to hand out some enrollment trends. So we're going to take a break for the PowerPoint for a moment, and we're going to look at spreadsheets, because when there's small numbers, I find PowerPoint just doesn't cut it, trying to see it on the big screen. So I went in and I analyzed 8 to 10 years of your CBEDS enrollment by grade level. Does everybody have a copy? Yeah, I tried to make enough copies for anybody who attended. So you can see, I'm looking back at 2014-15 and forward, and we're looking at how does our enrollment look over the past almost 10 years now. And you can see 10 years ago we had about just under 3,900 students. And then you can see in 2021, which is when that pandemic, the full year of the pandemic hit, we dropped to about 3,501. And then you can see we kind of have been hovering around 3,500. You can see that 3,574 I was referring to, and that's October of 23. And by the way, if you don't know what CBED stands for, it's the California Basic Education Data System. It's that first Tuesday in October where every school district in the state of California reports what their enrollment is. So we have an apples, or the state has an apples to apples comparison. You can also see at the top, TK, it only breaks out for 2021. CBEDS never broke out transitional kinder. It always lumped it in as part of the kinder program. It was considered a 2-year kinder program. So they started breaking it out actually in 23-24, but we went back and pulled more detailed data just so you could see what the TK is. So when you look prior to 2021, we did have TK, but we didn't take the time to break that out. And that all becomes important as we look at the current year enrollment. And when you look down, current year enrollment, you'll see 3,674, and then you'll see the transition program, and then you'll see non-public school. And so that's broken out differently. It's included in the numbers in the CBEDS counts. And then what we did, in order to do projections, and usually when I do projections, I do cohort projections. And cohort simply means every first grader becomes a second grader, every second grader becomes a third grader, and so on and so forth. But you also have to determine what kind of attrition are you going to have year to year. Because we know at certain grade levels in certain districts, a lot of times just at 8th to 9th grade, there will be an attrition level. Or if you're in a TK through 5th grade, 5th to 6th grade, you might see attrition. So I went back and looked, and that's in the box down below. What was your attrition, or in this case, your growth grade to grade? And of course, the pandemic kind of threw a monkey wrench into being able to do trend analysis, because it kind of threw off most districts' trends in a big way. So what I did is I looked at a 4-year average, of what I'm calling an attrition, but in your case, it's a growth rate, if you will, between you had more third graders this year than you had second graders last year. And then in certain cases, I only used a 3 or a 2-year average, and that's because in working with my colleagues like Marina, we looked at certain grade levels and she said, oh, well, those 2 years there was an anomaly because of this. And so we decided, if you look at ninth grade, for example, you can see in 21, 22, 22, 23, there was these big gains, but that really wasn't the norm. And so we used a 2-year average in that case. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with what is Albany's norm from grade to grade when we apply it to your cohort projections. So using all of that, we then projected 25, 26, 26, 27, and so on and so forth. And with that set of assumptions, you can see what the bottom line ends up looking like. Now, TK and kinder become a little bit more challenging because we can't use cohort projections. But I can tell you, 25, 26, projecting 125 is probably conservative because we know we're adding, right now, June 2nd is the cutoff date. It's going to move to September 1st or whatnot next year. So we know we're going to gain 2 or 3 months worth of birthdays or kids with birthdays during those months. So I'm trying to be somewhat conservative here in order to not get people too excited about how many kids. And I would just say, and I have a little disclaimer down below, these are for informational purposes only. We didn't go out and evaluate how many new developments you have, and we didn't go out and develop or evaluate your birth rates. We didn't do any of that. But I have found over the decades that using these type of projections actually can get us pretty close to what we're trying to find. And what does all this information say? It says to me that you're looking at relatively flat enrollment. You're not looking at a significant decline. And as a refresher, in your adopted budget, not only had we projected only 3,550, and we're at 3,700, but we had projected a decline of 62 and 63 respectively in the 2 upcoming years. So when we're looking at our budget situation and for planning purposes, knowing where our enrollment is going, knowing where our revenues are going to go is super important. And so that's why we wanted to kind of share this with you. We'll be looking at it once CBEDS is certified, which happens usually in November. We'll have a better idea because we're going through scrubbing the data. But I think this gives us a really good idea that we're not looking at a serious decline in enrollment, at least not given this information. Is there any questions about what I just went through? I know it's kind of a mouthful. Okay, good. So going back to the PowerPoint. So now we take that enrollment information and we say, okay, what's our ADA going to be, or our average daily enrollment? The adopted budget had an estimated P2 ADA of 3,400. So we were estimating based on that 3,550 kids, our ADA as a P2, which is on or before April 15th, was going to be 3,400. Our funded ADA, which is not the same anymore, because historically we've always been able to use current year ADA or prior year ADA, whatever was greater. Now we have the option of using a 3-year average because of the impacts of the pandemic. So when this budget was developed back in June, we were using a 3-year average. And you can see that was 29 ADA higher, and that's why we were using it. So I went through and looked at our current enrollment, not the 3,701, but the 3,694. And we have to do ADA by grade span because our revenue is by grade span. And we used a 95% attendance rate. So we're assuming kids are showing up 95% of the time. The attendance rate, I went back and looked at the P2 last year compared to CBEDS, because that's of 23, and our attendance rate was anywhere from 95.3 to 95.7, depending on the school, depending on the grade level. So 95% I felt was a relatively conservative rate, so that because we want this to be the lowest amount it's going to be, not the highest. We want to just grow from here. So based on that, we're looking at an estimated ADA of 3,509. So we would move out of using our 3-year average to using current year ADA because we're seeing this level of growth. And you can see that's an increase of 80 ADA. 109 ADA P2 to P2, but the funded ADA only goes up by 80 because we were using that 3-year average, okay? Sorry it took so long on those slides, but it's important that we understand that piece of it. So then we go into, we looked at unrestricted revenues, and I projected out, I redid LCFF calculations using that ADA, assuming the same level of unduplicated count. Even though we're growing, we don't know if our unduplicated count will grow, so I assume the same level of unduplicated, again, to be somewhat conservative. And you can see that that's an increase from 41.5 to $42.5 million. So we gain almost $1 million, not quite. Now, our mandated costs we looked at, no change there. Our non-Prop 20 lottery, that's our unrestricted, we looked at how we closed. We looked at, it's based on annual ADA, and we're actually estimating an increase. We looked at our interest earnings, and these are, again, we're looking at all sorts of revenue. These are just the biggest pieces. We looked at interest earnings, and based on what we saw last year, we're going ahead and increasing our interest earnings budget. Now, we know rates might not stay as high as they were last year, but remember, we also closed with more money, so we have a little bit stronger cash position as well. So we're kind of assuming maybe the interest rates will come down a little bit, but our cash is better. So that's a gain of almost 1.2 million, 1,175,000. However, when you're growing, you're not just getting more revenue, you have to add more staff. So then we go to the expenditure page. So we added a transitional kinder teacher because we had to add a class for TK this year over the summer. And so we added a teacher and we added an instructional assistant. So those are additional costs we weren't planning. And I think we actually added some 6th grade staffing as well. So because we saw growth, we ended up having to add some staffing. So that offsets that increase in revenue. Our routine restricted maintenance, again, looking at how we closed, last year we had to bump it up to 1.9 million, almost just over. In looking at it more recently, since I did this PowerPoint, it's probably going to be a little bit higher than this. And the requirement is 3% of your total expenditures in the general fund. So it'll probably be closer to $2 million when I look at that. Categorical programs, we make contributions to categorical programs, things like universal pre-K, which is where we charge some of our transitional kinder teachers. We only have about 49,000 left, so we had to make a contribution to offset that. Special ed transportation, we're transporting more students, or we're estimating, so we had to increase that contract and therefore increase the contribution. Textbook adoptions, you know, there used to be a categorical or a state funding source for textbooks. It was called, we called it the IMFRP, or the Instructional Materials Fund Realignment Program. And so we used to get a dedicated amount of money every year from the state that said, here's for districts to use for specifically for textbook adoptions. But in 2012, when we went to the LCFF, they rolled all of that into the LCFF, so there's no longer a dedicated state funding source. Other than Prop 20 lottery, which a lot of districts use. So we know we have some textbook adoptions on the horizon, and we're looking at recommending that we start building in an annual contribution to a textbook fund so we can start preparing for that. And then school care, we received their very generous grant of about $260,000. Some of that comes with matching funds, so we actually have to contribute some money for some of the intervention, the math intervention, et cetera, and so that's about $83,000. So when we look at our contributions to restricted programs, we're increasing that contribution by about $500,000. That's an offset to that additional revenue. Okay, next page. I didn't get into a lot of dollars here. I'm just giving you an idea of some of the expenditures that we're analyzing and evaluating. So we're looking at staffing. We added that TK class. We're finalizing staffing. There was a lot of open positions in June when we adopted the budget. So now we know what the staff is. We're adjusting budgets accordingly. We're reviewing things like substitute budgets. How did we close last year? Do we need to increase or decrease them? Classified, same thing. We looked at our site budgets. We met with the principals in August. We were able to provide them with what their site budgets are, and we actually added some supplemental funding that they could use with their SIPSAs to be able to have some local control and determine how to best support their student population. We've looked at custodial supplies. We had to add some classroom furniture. If we added a TK class, it needed furniture to go with it. Property and liability and utilities. Again, there's probably 4,000 line items in the budget. These are just some of the highlights. So how does it look? And this, again, this is very preliminary. This was just a shot, taking a look at it a week ago and saying, okay, with some of the adjustments we've made, what do we look like? So I'm giving you the adopted budget. Certificated salary is 17.2 million. Now we're looking at closer to 17 million. Because again, we've adjusted for staffing. We know what our staffing is. Classified salaries went from roughly 5.4 to 5.1. Employee benefits, a drop there. Materials and supplies, an increase. Again, some of those site budgets, et cetera, adding some supplemental. Operating budget went from 2.7 to 3.1. When we look at things like Dr. Evans and I as interims, we're not being paid through salary and benefits, we're being paid through contract services, so that's kind of shifting money out of salaries and down to other operating expenditures, as an example. Capital outlay, and then indirect costs. So we're estimating right now a decrease in our expenditure side of the budget. Now that is going to be, it's a little bit of shifting sand because again, we're continuing to reconcile budgets as we speak. We're going through the categorical side, posting carryover, et cetera. So, but this kind of gives you a rough idea. It might be more like 250 or 325, but this kind of gives you a target. So then putting all that together, what does that estimated net impact look like? If we know the deficit spending in the adopted budget was $1,137,000, we've now increased our LCFF revenue by $1,175,000, but we've also increased our contributions by roughly $500,000. We've decreased our expenditures by roughly $300,000. The good news is we believe we're going to make a significant dent in that deficit spending, mostly driven by growth and ADA. But we do still have some deficit spending. We do think that at the end of the day, when we bring a budget revision, a formal one to you, there will still show some deficit spending, but at least a more reasonable level. I've given some disclaimers just, to say this is shifting sand. This is kind of giving you a snapshot in time, but it's not a formal budget revision yet. On the restricted side of the House, we're continuing to go through categoricals, doing many of the same things, of reconciling to position control, et cetera. The special education budget, Dr. Biggs and his staff have been super helpful, just trying to go through and understand what are our non-public school contracts, our non-public agency. I mention those because those are large contracts. If they're 100, 150,000 each and you've got 10 of them, it can be a huge shift. And we haven't finished doing some of that reconciliation. That's where I really anticipate some of the changes could come. We talked about the special ed contract. We talked about the textbooks, starting to budget for that textbook replacement or those adoptions. Establishing a student computer fund. I bring it up in the context of this because it is something that we believe we need to start contemplating. If we're going to continue with one-to-one devices, how do we do a refresh? We used, as many districts used, COVID one-time money to do refreshes in the past 4 years. COVID money's now almost completely gone or all gone. And so now we have to contemplate how are we going to sustain those one-to-one devices. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then again, we talked about updating the school care budget and the commitments we've made. Just touching on the parcel tax, what it was in the adopted budget. We just got an email, for example, yesterday from our consultants saying, okay, based on the adjustments we're seeing, here's the new estimate. So I adjusted for the new estimate. You can see for Measure J, the current estimate was 4.5. And so that's an increase of about $9,000, just under $9,000 for this year. And then I gave you what the final revenue was for last year, so you can kind of see that increase. It went up about $25,000. Measure G, which is the new measure, the current estimate is 4.7 million, and that's an increase of about 63,000. Measure G would be much harder to project because it was a new measure. So I think that your former CBO did a fantastic job getting as close to this target as she did. And then the final revenue for Measure B, you can see I put there as well. Okay, let's talk about student computer replacement. So I worked with Eric to try to understand how it works here in Albany, because every district is a little bit different. The number of years they expect their student devices, for example, can vary from district to district. So in looking at kinder through 8th grade, and if we assume a replacement every 5 years in those student devices, iPads for K2 and Chromebooks for 3rd through 8th grade, the estimated total cost is about $935,000. And that's assuming, we know we have iPads at the lower, a little more expensive, Chromebooks a little less expensive. If we assume 5 years, then we need to put 20% aside every year, and that's about $190,000. Then if we look at the high school, 9th through 12th grade, we would look at replacing every 4 years. And the theory is, I'm an incoming freshman, I get a new Chromebook, I've got a Chromebook for my high school experience. The estimated cost for that is about $400,000. And if over 4 years, that's about $100,000 a year. So what we're looking at is how do we develop a plan to start putting aside almost $300,000 a year so that we can have a fund that's, whether we're buying 800 or 1,200, we're putting aside the same amount every year to try to be prepared for that. And then also just, we have staff computers. We cannot live without computers. We cannot do our jobs without them. Teachers need computers in the classroom. Staff need computers to do their work. So what does that look like? And we're estimating about $90,000 to $100,000 a year for having some sort of computer replacement plan. And it's important that we start contemplating, is this where we want to go? And then how do we start setting that aside in the budget? And so tonight, in some ways, we're looking at starting that conversation and then getting some direction from the board. So our next steps, we're going to continue to reconcile and record 23-24 carryover for our categoricals. We're still in the process of analyzing that. Things like Title I, Title III, the other Title III, educator effectiveness, all of those categoricals. We need to adjust state and federal revenues. We're getting what's called a GAN, a grant award notification in. I got one in yesterday for workability. So we're getting GANs in, which basically inform us and confirm, yes, this is how much you're getting for that grant. A lot of times we're adopting our budget before we know for sure exactly how much we're going to get. Continue to monitor enrollment and attendance. Again, we're talking about computer replacement plan, finalizing a budget revision, and bring it back to you in November. This, again, so you're not waiting till December where you'll have another one. And then we're in the process of working with our auditors and kind of going through how we closed and getting ready to finalize our annual audit. So I know I just said a mouthful. Any questions, thoughts, input?
Well, first of all, this is amazing, the enrollment, because when we were coming back from COVID, I asked, can we figure out like exactly what's going on with our enrollment and really look at it? So we hired a company to do it. And it was like, well, this is a trend and that's a trend and you could go here, you could go there. But this is like actual data about our district and it's so helpful. So thank you for going through those steps and providing that, because I feel like we can actually see, and it's really clear grade level by grade level, what's going on. So I just want to start with that appreciation.
Thank you. We actually are doing it school by school too, but for attendance, we need to do it at the macro level.
Oh, I'm sure we're going to see those, right?
At some point, sure.
I feel like we find it fascinating. It also helps with all of our facilities conversations.
That's true, and I have used these types of projections many times over the years. I came from a district that grew 1,000 students over 8 years, and we were able to project very closely what that enrollment was going to be from year to year.
I just want to echo what Vonnie said. Thank you so much. So interesting. I mean, May of 22, Power School's prediction was completely off. It's been showing a decline for 3 years, and yours is just, well, I'm just super impressed, and I'm so relieved that we're going in that direction. And so I guess when we look at the budget meeting, we can see more about where we'll be allocating funds, and then we can have a conversation as a board to figure out what we want to invest in the schools. But I also really like the idea of the textbook fund and the computer fund. That just feels a really good sort of way of moving forward. But anyway, thank you so much for your work. It's very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So looking at the projections, it seems like the early entries are obviously you're making assumptions because you don't have data. How many years of TK do you think we need to have in your experience for it to become predictive of kinder and so on? Because it seems as I look at the projections going forward, right, that's the place where you've made assumptions about kids coming in, and that's the early warning sign, I guess, as I think about it from a revenue perspective, from the district perspective. Does that make sense?
It does. I think once you get to next year, full implementation of TK will have happened. So we've been building for TK for the past 4 or 5 years, and before that we had TK just for that short little 3-month window. And I guess it all just depends to a certain extent, because we have a little bit of wiggle room when we're taking inter-district transfer students. And I know that the district has done a very effective job saying, okay, we have gaps here or there, we have vacant seats, if you will, therefore we can backfill, and try to be very thoughtful on how we take inter-district transfer where we have capacity. So, you know, a lot of it is a little bit based on that, but I think we need to get to that full year of implementation to know what that's going to look like. It's not an exact science. I mean, the reality is, and this is why demographers have such a hard time projecting enrollment, because they use so many scientific facts that it's sketchy at best. It's really hard to throw that dart and get it right there. So I find simple is better. But even then, I mean, I worked for a district where a company came in and closed an apartment complex because they wanted to convert it to high-end condos, and the district lost 300 kids over the summer. Those types of things you can't predict.
Yeah,
so
totally get it. But the cohort is something I understand fairly well.
Yes.
And so understanding that, what I take away here is the entry point of the cohort. It becomes really key to understanding the long-term piece, and that's why I asked the TK question.
What's interesting is if you look back at the cohort attrition rates.
Yeah, you can see some different ones. It's really interesting.
Pre-pandemic, it was very different than post-pandemic, which I found fascinating.
You can even see where our good and bad cohorts exist. Like I'm starting to highlight those here.
It's hard not to geek out.
I know, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, I get it. That's why I highlighted that one year in yellow, just so that people could see the pandemic pre and post.
And this may be a question for later, but like, I think last time we talked about unrestricted revenues being in the general fund being roughly 44.6 million, I think we had. And here it looks like you started with a different base. Is that it could totally be my lack of, I'm looking at the wrong thing, but I'm just trying to reconcile with all the great changes you've discovered, where other puts and takes might have gone. I may be asking a question to remember back last time, so apologies.
No, that's okay. I mean, this is the total amount of the LCFF. The thing that's confusing with LCFF is it's funded by like 12 different funding streams. So you've got the total amount, and then you've got state aid, and then you've got what's called the EPA, or Education Protection Account, which is really Prop 30 back when Governor Brown was trying to save education during the recession. And then you've got all your local property taxes. And so all of that goes to funding the calculations. But I mean, roughly 70% of our revenue comes from the LCFF, so it's a big part of our budget. We're very fortunate here with the parcel tax. I mean, the amount of money that a district this size is collecting from the parcel tax, very fortunate and very generous community.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if it's too early to ask about this, but President Davidson, you had brought up the attendance change that the state is moving towards. It's a pilot program, but how significant of a change can we expect of like increased funding through that? I know we're already at like 95 out of the 100% for attendance anyways, but how soon can we see that impacting us? But also like, is it gonna be a significant, I don't know, like I don't wanna be too hopeful, but then
Are you talking about going to funded?
based on enrollment versus attendance?
You know, I've been hearing that conversation for so many years that I don't get too excited about it.
They approved a pilot program for it. So I'm trying not to get too excited, but also, yeah.
It would be great if we could move to a different model. I mean, I started when we actually got funded for excused absences. And then they eliminated that, so we didn't even get that anymore. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the pilot. But I wouldn't plan on it. I guess we'll see. But it's a great question, and it would be great if we move in that direction, for sure.
Sorry, I was trying to find the amount of money we spent on Power School for the enrollment projections. Okay, I had two quick things that just came to the top of mind for me during this, and one of those is we definitely need to schedule a conversation around what we want to do with technology and computers, and I think that as part of that, we really need to hear from our classroom teachers at all levels how they're using technology. So like a one-to-one in kindergarten, you know, school in Oakland I'm at, there's a cart and it's shared between 2 classrooms or 3 or a grade level at the lower grades because they're not using them as much. So there's that, and maybe we want to do that, but maybe we want to increase to some kind of a smart board or something in our classroom so it's a more full class. Anyways, I think we should have that conversation.
Are you suggesting a committee?
No. I mean, no, I'm saying. I'm suggesting that we have a presentation from our different, you know, staff about what's actually happening on the ground level. Or we go in and do observations and we see what's actually happening.
And that's part of why I put next steps is to develop the plan. I mean, I showed you what it could look like, but you're absolutely right. And also I wanted to just show you how much it would cost, because that's the most important thing. Having an understanding of that level of financial commitment annually and overall is important. I mean, and we had a lot of one-time money to help districts across the state get through, and as that money is drying up, or has completely dried up already, then it is important. But I do think it's going to take a greater conversation to develop or to fine-tune that plan. My bigger question is, you know, should we start contemplating putting an annual amount aside, and what would that amount look like? But you're right. You do need a lot more input.
And I think the other thing that's top of mind for me is seeing these and hearing and seeing again that we're going to expand our TK and looking at what happened this year, which was like, oh my gosh, we have to put them here because we have no more room. I think we really need to start having a strategic conversation about our spaces. And, you know, I know at our middle school that we built the annex previously, and now we're finally fully utilizing it, but it still sounds like we could be hitting sort of our physical capacity limits fairly soon here. So what are we going to do? How is there anywhere that we can get creative, or what do we need to think about in terms of that, and just making sure that like we're keeping those spaces safe as we're adding bodies back in at those levels.
Well, and I would say that from my perspective, there is an urgency around some computer replacement, because I know that there are computer labs that are having greater challenges, and that the need for replacement is much higher on the list than just coming up with an overall plan. And we're currently evaluating where we have some wherewithal to do some of that in the near term because, you know, computers are just essential to the educational program at this point. So there's the bigger plan, but then there's also these smaller needs that are really coming to the forefront. And for staff, it really comes down to productivity. I mean, we need to give our staff the tools they need to do their jobs. It's the whole working smarter, not harder. So, and being more efficient with our staff.
I mean, I did have a middle school student tell me the other day that she had to take the science test at home because her computer wasn't working in class. And I was like, well, that is a bit of an equity thing, because if you get the non-working computer and you're being assigned it as homework, that doesn't really work. So we need to really, if we have a computer lab or a classroom, I'm hoping that we're getting that feedback, and it's like, let's work on that more rapidly. Okay, any other budget conversations? Thanks for not making this a terrible one of like, we need to find $2 million more to get rid of. That'd be fun.
Well, I mean, and when we come back at first interim, you'll see multi-year projections, because that will also be super informative, like what do our multi-year projections look like with some new set of assumptions. But at least this gives you an idea that you don't have quite the level of immediate financial challenge that was initially thought. And that's really because of the growth that we're seeing. So that's great news. So thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on this one?
Yes, I would just like to add that not only do we need computers, we need to, in your example with the student, it could very well have been that they weren't able to get on the internet, because we have a huge problem where, and I talked to you about this just last week, Dr. Evans, and you also experienced it, where it takes a long time to get on the internet. Not everybody in the class is able to get on there, and so people are starting different things at different times. And so again, maybe that student wasn't able to take the test because by the time their internet was working, everybody else was finished with the test. That is something that happens regularly. So as we think about getting new computers, hopefully we can get bandwidth that provides enough so that we can all use the computers. Thank you.
I've been hearing about that challenge, especially at the high school, for a little while now. So I'm hoping that if we put this something aside, we can maybe work on that as a quick next step, because having working internet is very important. Okay, we're going to adjourn this item, and now we get our superintendent and board member reports.
I just happened to be at the Children's Center this morning, and I just want to give a shout out to the staff, the teachers. Working with those little ones, I know it's very, very rewarding, but my hat is off to them, because they were really amazing keeping all of the students on task. And so I just want to make sure I gave them a shout out. And also a shout out to all the administrators that work so hard, and sometimes they feel underappreciated. So I just want to let them know how much I appreciate all of them. Thank you. One last thing, make sure you read the Friday bulletin or weekly newsletter, community letters. Lots of great information in there, and we'll have a lot more things to say, but make sure you read it, because lots of good stuff's in there. Thank you.
Mine's quick. I went to the high school PTSA meeting last night, which was great. If you have a kid at the high school, please join the PTSA. They raise money for staff appreciation, for teacher grants, for funding various student groups. So please join up. And as the student trustees already mentioned, school site council meeting is next Thursday, October 17th. Instructional Improvement Council is not until November. And also in the meantime, there's homecoming too, which is that starting next Friday, is that right? Or this Friday? Next Friday, perfect. And then it goes for the week after that as well. Okay, that's it for me, thank you.
Okay, so a few things, and I'll actually start with just a quick shout out to teachers and staff and administrators also, because all those awesome budget numbers we were looking at, that's because people come here for our schools, which is about those folks very largely. So Yay, thank you. Awesome. Good to have happy news. So from middle school things, middle school grown-ups can come and party and get together and meet each other. This Thursday, 7 p.m., Donkey and Goat Winery and there's going to be music and food, and it's a fundraiser for the PTA, and it's a great opportunity for parents of middle school students to get a chance to kind of mix and mingle. So Principal Mapes sent us notification about that, but if folks are free, they should stop by. Also, Umami Home and Gift is donating a portion of all October sales to anyone who mentions the middle school. It's an awesome store on Solano, at the corner of Solano and Cornell, basically. I have gotten Christmas presents from there. I have gotten Mother's Day presents from there. It's super awesome, and they're always open when I need last-minute things, which I super appreciate, and I told them that. So if you can stop in during October and send some money toward the middle school and also pick up great items, that's fabulous. And then last middle school thing is that there's a PTA meeting next Thursday in person. So that's October 17th, 7 p.m. in the library. Our very own Trustee Mahoney is going to be talking about Measure L, so yay for that. Riveting material, no doubt. So those are all my middle school things.
Be there.
Don't miss it. Those are my middle school things. And then wanted to say that the Black Parent Advisory Group is going to be having a meet and greet toward the end of the month. It's Thursday, October 24th. It's in the AMS library. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. Whole families are welcome to come. There will be pizza, and we're going to be talking, in addition to getting to meet each other, we're going to talk about resources and supports that are available for all of our students that are but particularly that pertain to or are especially important for our Black students in the district. And we're going to be talking about resources that are available at all different levels throughout the district, elementary, middle, and the high school level as well. So if you are a family member of a Black student in our district, hope that you can come out and we can have community and meet each other and learn about how we're supporting our students. That's it.
Shout out to the API Parent Engagement Group. We had our first mixture of the school year this past weekend. It was lovely, and stay tuned for all of our other events that'll be happening throughout the year. Ocean View is having Photo Day on October 10th and 11th. The schedules for which classes are taking photos on what day has already gone out on Parent Square. Please check that. Make sure your kids are ready, because I sure enough forgot about it. So make sure your kiddos are ready for that. We have a new parent advisory group, the South SWANA, which is Southwest Asian and North African Parent Engagement Group. The first meet and greet is taking place October 12th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. hosted at Ocean View. There will be refreshments, snacks from Zaytun and a local Albany business. So lots of fun stuff. Come meet families and help us plan what type of events we want to bring to AUSD. Ocean View is having our Fall Festival October 19th from 11 to 3 p.m. Again, it's open to everyone. We're going to have obstacle courses, graffiti on hats, not on people or on our site, but just specifically the hats, face painting, pumpkin decorating, carnival games, taco trucks, Korean barbecue, boba, snow cones, like all the things. We're doing all the things. Please come join us. We do still need volunteers from the middle school and high school to come support our games. Still need parents to sign up for the bake sale or to volunteer with any supporting activities. So please sign up for that if you would like to. And I swear there was something else and I forgot.
Was able to attend another great Marin morning last week for Hispanic Heritage Month. Saw the capoeira troupe, or I guess it's a troupe, of dancing with the kids and doing all sorts of stuff, which was fantastic. Student representatives got most of the things. Family Math Night this Thursday. Picture Day next week. Marin kids are probably still at the age where you can get them to dress up appropriately, unlike my high schoolers, no disrespect. And Friday the 18th is International Potluck, always a great Marin tradition.
Okay. I have to say that the recent Monday morning assembly at Ocean View convinced my nephew that he now wants to do some like judo or karate or mixed martial art, and it's been fantastic. So our kids really take a ton away from those, and it was just so cute to hear him talking about that and watching it. Cornell is having their amazing pumpkin patch fundraiser right now. There are bake sales on Saturday the 12th and Saturday the 19th. They're still, taking signups for some bakers. And I just wanted to really shout out, I'm hearing every single report has partnerships with local businesses, many of which are like owned or run or have employees who are also parents in our district. And I just think it's really one of those special things about Albany that I so appreciate is how that reciprocation works. And a couple of other updates. One, as we're moving into November, I want everyone to keep in mind ways that you can, be thoughtful as the months go on about school facility needs and ways you can support school facility needs in our district. So just keep that in mind as we move through our months. And I would also like to remind everybody of something that came out in a recent email, that we have selected a superintendent finalist. We are very excited about this, and we will be bringing the contract and making the announcement at our November 19th meeting, and we are still working all of those details out, and we will also be planning a time for the community to meet this finalist before they start in their position. And we really want to thank our interim superintendent, Donald Evans, for continuing on with us and just keeping our ship steady as we continue this process till December. He thinks.
And I also want to thank the broader community for helping us with the process, getting the input, not just from, obviously, from this group, but really a diverse group of people really came out with some really thoughtful feedback, which I know I and the board really appreciated.
Yeah, our community panel was an excellent community panel and really helped us be thoughtful in that whole process. And it was great because we had some questions and they had other questions, and it really broadened the discussion around candidates and helping us just think about all those things and finding what we feel is hopefully going to be a really good fit for this district. And with that, we will adjourn our, you need to, you have one more? Huh? No, I'm going to adjourn this item and make sure that we take future agenda items, of which I have a few. So if anyone else wants to start, please do.
Just two short ones. One was, as we mentioned from this week's consent calendar, just a brief conversation about the TAD Health contract. And then the other one was whether we could have an update on the Prop 28 programs and what we now currently have in place at each of the schools that received Prop 28 funding. And as far as future enrollment and budgeting is concerned, I think we'll just wait till our first interim just to get some more information about that, and then we'll make a plan. Okay, thank you.
I don't know if it falls under agenda item or just an issue I would like for us to look into is within the next month and a half or so, we do have the opportunity to reach out to our local, or not our local, but our state elected officials to request budget items, and I think we should look at areas of need and if we can convince our elected official to carry that budget ask at the statewide level for us. I've seen other districts do it and bring in literally $11 million, and I think we could benefit from something like that. I've done one of those before. I'm happy to work with whoever can help lead this process, or if I need to lead it, I'm more than happy to do that, but I would need some district level expertise on what are our financial needs and how we can convince people. So just, yeah. But we do have a very tight deadline on that. Typically, they know what they're going to want to push for by end of November. So the sooner we can work on this, the better.
Send me an emails because I'm not sure how to write the notes on that one. Don't let me forget. Do that. I would love for us to, kind of along those lines, bring back a discussion. There's a couple different funding sources that have been raised, and one of them is the CTE. There's a CTE pathways. I guess there's some funding through that we are not getting that we could be getting. And then someone else raised, sorry.
CTE deadline is next week.
We better work on that. Or try for next year, but at least we can start the conversation. There's an HVAC, like an electric HVAC funding. I'll send this along, but I think it's, something that we want to just keep at the forefront. Maybe that's part of our budget thing, is like we just get updates on the different funding sources that we've applied for or that we're aware of or kind of are in the works, so that we have some ideas, and when the community asks, we can say, yes, we are pursuing that. Here's the point person. So maybe that's how we go around that. And I think that's all. Any others? Okay, this meeting's adjourned.